Good morning, everybody. I'm starting the show a little bit early today because I want to check the sound on some stuff. I'm getting a little bit of noisiness in there, and I was wondering if anybody that jumps in the early part of the feed can actually check that for me and see if it sounds okay. Or I'll maybe have to check it myself and hope for not too much. Hey, Rocky Mountain Mike. What's happening? I'm jumping on early because I just want to check audio. Is it, I'm just getting a little bit of noise on the input. Sounds okay? It sounds clear? There's not a shh going on in the background? That's more my concern, because on my input, I'm getting this kind of minor noise. Awesome. Okay. Well, if the audio sounds good, then I'll just stick around with you guys till the show starts. I think that'd be a great idea. It's a good time. I'm, hoping in a minute. I'm logged into Chicago. We'll see how that masters up. And, yeah, should be all right. Looks like improvement of technology each time. We're trying. Morning, Al. Finally monetized on you. Yeah, well, in some areas, mainly because I've started throwing the little disclaimer of fair use up for when we use audio. And we've also started using more royalty-free music. Chicago has started doing that because the CPT has started doing that because they have more and more of their channels that they're putting up on YouTube. Gee, I wonder who started that. And in doing so, I'm sure they've gotten some copyright pushback because the license that you use for radio, which is paid and managed like every other radio station, doesn't quite get cleaned up. When it transfers over to YouTube, it doesn't quite deliver the same thing. So, needless to say, it's a reasonable. Hi. Needless to say, it's helpful to me as well because then I don't have to worry about copyright pushbacks just on us using a piece of music from it. And it's a shame that we can't use little bits of in and out music, on, especially when we're talking about or referencing an artist in conversation. We should be able to do that within the fair use policies of YouTube, but I think how long the radio station uses to go to break, it's just annoying. Anyways, so rather than have to deal with that, we'll just dive out of that. And then anytime I'm going to use that stuff, level's a bit low. Okay, that's good to know. Check. Maybe, ooh, that's very hot. Hey, yeah. How about that? That seems pretty loud. That's pretty quality right there. What does it take to get a salesman to fix me up with some Ernie Ball bronze in here? Yeah. There's a variety of string gauges in here, quite frankly. I use heavy bottom, light top. Make whatever pun jokes you would like in that process, but I use and I don't know what you play, Rocky Mountain Mike, but I use 56 to 10s. Is my preference. I used to play lighter strings, and then I broke my finger, and my ring finger has a little extra just because it's slightly stiffer than my other fingers. If I'm bending, it'll kind of hold there or whatever, so I use a slightly heavier gauge string because it sort of overcompensates. And so to keep from bending out of tune, essentially, I raise the gauge of my strings, and that helped to rehab my hand as well. But, you guys know that I get that wonky knuckle, and but that's why. How you doing? And what's up, Carl? Good morning. Hi. How are you? Let's see. Yeah, we got a decent amount of guitars in here. That is absolutely true. I'm linked up to Chicago. I'm just waiting for them to answer me back. So fingers crossed. They're all good. I'm certainly loaded for bear and ready to do the show. Regardless. So Zoltan. Good morning and good afternoon, because technically speaking, I'm in L.A. where it's good morning, and the show is on in the Midwest, is our primary station at WCPT, so good afternoon applies as well. Hi, everybody. Hi, Yola. Hi, GT Rico. How you doing? Okay, out. I don't know why the performance... Ooh, send is down to 22. What's up with that? Jumping back up. Hopefully sound is okay. There we go. We're back up. I don't know. Like, I guess they jockey for position as far as video output and the like. Okay. And I got a fairly low output, so it should be okay. Part of it is that I always monitor YouTube on the way back, and that's probably not the best thing to do on the same computer. I'm sure that jacks up the... It's the only way I can monitor, make sure an image is coming out, except by you guys. So I'm going to turn off the monitor page that I usually use, and hopefully I can see what's, if anything goes awry, you guys can let me know in there. And yes, good luck and good afternoon, Bermuda. What's happening, Christopher? Thank you, Tamara. It's a good setup. It is. It's very nice. This is the one of the rehearsal spaces of 2 that my band uses. This is the in-house one, and then the other one is I'm going to be doing a show from there if I can get a signal of quality from there. I may have to buy a 3G router or an LTE router just that does the signal for me to be able to do. I can probably do a live stream there. I just couldn't do radio in it at the same time. The sound would be wicked. So, but hopefully, yeah. So, good morning, everybody. We are in L.A., Carl. So, hey, Al, what do you do to royalties go to your family for a song? Can you use it on YouTube? It's funny, Edward. I use TuneCore to publish my songs. And in doing so, TuneCore makes sure that I get the proper payment if any of my songs are used on YouTube, allegedly. They're not that great at it. But the irony is that the only copyright strikes I have received on my own songs have been when I use them on my page. And undoing them is a pain in the tuchus. So, I know tons of people have posted my songs on YouTube, and you can look at, most artists, if you look around long enough, you can find their entire album song by song on YouTube for free. And YouTube is supposed to clean that up by being able to, kind of Shazam your songs and know when they're being played someplace. Well, the only times that my songs have gotten a royalty strike has been when I've used them for my own stuff. It's really hilarious. Skinner Doc on Showtime is awesome, by the way. I will watch it. Wicked Smart, yeah. I'll start praying right away so you can perform. Well, thank you. How's Davenport Industries and Tasha? All are great. Thank you for asking. Listen to prominent Mom's to hear his articulate voice again. It's lovely. I got caught grief from SoundCloud for uploading tracks from my own album. Yeah, it's a very peculiar thing. There should be some way to, guarantee your own usage and stuff. And TuneCore's not super clear on how to do that. That would be my only change with them. And Chicago, where are you? I'm not hearing from Lady B. Let's see. Let's see if I can connect with her. Maybe make a voice call. Hopefully she won't, swear over the air or anything like that, because God forbid we have any, Hi. Good morning.
Hi. My phone's off because I got it wet. I was under the storm.
Oh, no. Well, I'm signed in on tie line 1 or 2. I don't know which one. But I allegedly have signal, so I'm using the tie line, so it should be all locked up. Yeah, it won't be, I don't know which one it's on, but I'm logged in to the IP that Matt gave me. So.
Let me bring up Satellite 2, because I'm sending signal on Satellite 1.
Yeah, send it on 2 then, I guess, because that might be the one he sent me. So, and we'll see if I get any return back on it. Because right now I'm not seeing anything from you guys, but I am sending pretty solidly, in theory. I don't. No problem. I've been here the whole time, I swear. I'm not delinquent or anything.
That's not it. It's not like this because I get this.
Okay, well, I'm hooked up to some tie line.
There you go.
Check, check, check. Hello?
Yeah, that's you.
Yeah, there we go. Okay. Can you send me something so I can hear you so I know what I'm getting?
Do you hear it now?
No. Nope. I'm not. Nope. I hear stuff on the phone. I don't hear stuff through the tie line yet. Fear not. If you use the test pass. Yeah, no, Edward, you can hear me clearly, though? My sound? No problem. It's all good. Yeah, there you are. Look at that. Perfect. I do not. So whatever's the ads aren't routing, which is fine. I just want to be able to hear our transition in and out music, obviously. Hi, g'day, West Goth music. Is that your practice space, Al? It's one of them. Yeah, we have two, because Kush. One is the modified studio garage. So if I tilt up if I go to the other camera, let's see. You can probably see the old unused guitar or garage door opener. There you go. Yeah. Let's see. So, but for it's a good space, and it seems pretty clear. So hopefully our audio will remain strong throughout the whole thing, and yeah, we're not No, everything's great. I can't believe it. I'm so happy. Well, yeah, we'll just assume that. Was the station struck by lightning again? Okay. Of course they did. But yeah. Par for the course. Right. Well, that's more than we usually have, so I'm extremely happy. I don't care. Yeah, not a problem. So cool. All right. Well, everything's, everything's running smooth, in theory. Can't hear WCPT through Hal. Can you now, Brad? Let me see. Hey, Lady B, can you check your mic again? Just like what's coming to me? Oh, that's weird. Okay. Check. Say that again. Oh, that's weird. Oh. Yes, I do. It's yeah. Check. I gotta. All right. I can hear it just fine. You don't have to send it to me. I'm like right now. I'm just for whatever reason. Headphone 2 is not. Okay. Sorry about that. Chat room, we have to have at least one audio kerfuffle in this process. I hear it just fine. I'm going to check something real quick. So, oh, wait a second. Hold on. Could the audio issue be built-in input? Yep, that's correct. I didn't hear this. All right. I've got 2 minutes to figure this out. And the key would be a headphone splitter. Which God only knows if I can scrounge up in just a minute. Hold on. This will be fun. Oh no, maybe. Haha. Hold on 1 second. There we go. Rats. Okay. Well, as long as you guys can hear me. I don't know that it's okay because the phones aren't going to work. And the only thing you'll miss are the commercials. So we should be all right. Rather than me trying to rewire an entire setup on the run. Let's see. Oh, thanks, Christopher. Look at that. Right out of the gate. As long as I sound okay to you guys, we should be all right. Is it Denny's per quote? Thank you. Yeah. $4.99 for the proper cable. So I set up last night so we could do the show, and then one of the other guys needed to use the studio, Ray, who uses it, and somehow he decided everything needed to be put away that was on the desk set to do for radio this morning. And my little headphone splitter just took a powder. I don't know why that would be. Yeah. So, hard to say. Yeah. Over the course of the show, I'll peek around during breaks to see that. Yeah. Is there? I am not in the garage in Vegas. No. And is the buzzing rough? Is there buzzing? Is it not good? I know there's a little bit of. There is a buzzing. Okay. No buzzing from Brad. Yes from Christopher. General standard. Do you hear a buzzing sound? So I can just get a general thing if it's just people who have really good speakers. Hey. Hi, Julie. Thank you for even popping in. Vacation in the Black Forest, which is, of course, code for witchcraft. Yeah, let's see if in any ways that brings... Okay. Hopefully if I can... Let's see. Check 1. Check 2. Okay. How's that, guys? Is that better? Did that get rid of the surface noise? All good, good. No buzz, no collusion. No collusion. It's all good in the hood. Very low AC hum. Yeah, that's but low and unobtrusive. Okay, cool. Did I shaved off a little of it, hopefully with the mastering output, so that might thank you, Yola. And it's splendid. Perfect, no buzz. Excellent. Okay. Yeah, I just shaved off a little bit of it. This kind of sonic junk noise around here. This whole place needs to be rewired. Don't get me started. Am I and probably my guess would be Rocky Mountain Mike, West Garth Music, and Carl, probably the ones who responded the most. Did anybody else find a very meditative act in wiring, like wiring their studio or their AV stuff? Like or my girlfriend makes fun of me for being sort of a home automation nut, which will probably be the birth of a new YouTube series that I will do, because the amount of just like HomePod stuff, because I'm shifting from, I started with Alexa and I was waiting for the HomePod stuff to get out, and then I'm moving all my stuff to HomeKit. That I just like I can get under it like a desk or a table or behind gear and just start like wiring and then shielding stuff from each other and like nitpicking about wiring for ages, and it's probably why I like doing all of my own kind of gear stuff with the show. Like any any sane radio host who took that part of their life seriously would probably have hired a tech producer a long time ago to just go, hey man, it's $50. Can you roll in and just make sure stuff is set up before my show starts? And then but I find it kind of like, okay, I know everything's plugged in right. And I know if something goes south, I know what to pull and when. Because so many times we've done the show and it's been this mystery of what fell apart. And you guys have seen me, like, be able to yank the entire thing. Like, when the power died the other day, when I was like, Russians have hacked our power grid. And the whole thing went south. I was able to, like, gack everything up and rebuild a setup in, like, it took me, I think, 8 minutes to get us back on the air, which is pretty, yeah. Pretty crazy. You have Nest. Do we use Nest? No, we use a different automated thermostat in the house. Those are the only ones that's require some like kind of like tricky wiring, because you can short out your your HVAC unit if you don't hook it up right, and so you really got to it's one of those things like turn off the power and double check your wires and then turn the power back on. And when it's really hot, it's not the time to be, changing your AC controller in the house. But once it's up, it's fantastic. And you can, automated control of like home HVAC is one of those like really unsung heroes of energy efficiency that's going to come up. It's probably a noisy electronic environment. You can buy hum eliminators such as Eptex Home X to cost $70. That's a great idea, Westgard. Yeah. Last time we moved, I added the step of having rear speakers embedded in the wall behind our couch with wiring routed through the wall, stair bridge. I bypassed that, Carl, and I have one of those Vizio Bluetooth like subwoofer and speaker systems for the house. It's a sound bar, 2 speakers, and the subwoofer goes under the couch and has a rumble effect. So when you're playing video games or watching a movie, it thumps underneath you. It's pretty shocking experience, especially if you're playing an FPGA or FPS game. And and the surround is really solid on it. But the thank you, the satellite speakers Bluetooth off the base, off the plug-in subwoofer that connects via Bluetooth to the sound bar, which is directly to the TV. So I'm a fan, needless to say. That worked really well. Yeah, the subwoofer's wireless. Great. Ours is under the couch. It's under the what, Carl? Okay. So much news. Yeah. Welcome to the show, everybody. It's great to be on here. And of course, simulcasting at houseparks.tv or on the YouTube channel if you are a friend of the Twitter. And you find me on there. Links to go and join the chat room if you would like. It has been yet another insane week where the president's only answer to the trouble he has created for himself has been to flail about on Twitter and accuse everyone who disagrees with him or has found fault with his business or political ethics over the last 3 years, an enemy of the people or somehow a conflicted Dem, or even though a good portion of those conflicted Dems are actually Republicans in law enforcement who are quintessential, who have historically been a sort of conservative, if not fully Republican voting bloc, right? And not the least of which was one of the little-known people who've been talking about this. And we're going to get to a lot of stuff today. We're going to talk about Patton, the most recent indictment, which is an incredibly telling one. And everyone was talking about how today, here we have Giuliani saying that today was the initial date. He's since punted it to the 7th. But today was the day when you can count on the Mueller investigation being wrapped up. And even without the president talking to him, which, by the way, he would love to do. I would love to talk to him, even though my attorneys say don't talk to him because you're a moron and you'll spill the beans because of ego. Don't talk. But I would love to talk to him, but I'm not going to talk to him because, I'm a leader who makes my own decisions unless my attorney tells me otherwise, in which case I'm a leader who makes my own decisions until I decide to go against my attorneys, and then I'll speak to it because my own ego will allow me, and then I'll set a perjury trap for myself that Mueller couldn't even dream of. And so, but Bruce Orr has been one of these, he's a senior DOJ lawyer who's been around for quite a while. He's one of these people who hump by in the background in the legal world of the DOJ for quite some time. And in the process of having this, this job, he encountered early on the Steele dossier. And the Steele dossier, which Carter Page loves to call the dodgy dossier. They tried to push that as the branding for it. And then Trump, has pushed the fake dossier or the discredited dossier or the disgusting dossier or whatever this multiple rebranding attempts that they've tried with the Steele dossier, which, for the record, the idea that Trump is pushing that the Steele dossier is indicative of some sort of Russian collusion that the Democrats did or foreign collusion that the Democrats did, because through Fusion GPS, an opposition research company, which was hired by the Washington Free Beacon, which is a conservative paper in D.C., to basically scuttle Trump's chances at the nomination early. Then when they realized they were failing, they jumped on the Trump train and left this dossier, which they had paid to create. They'd paid Fusion GPS, and who had hired Christopher Steele, who was an MI6 agent who had specialized in Russians and the sort of Russian intelligence and criminal exercise that had been going on for a long time, the enterprise that had gone on for a long time. They hired him because he knew a lot about it. Kind of like when if you're running a cold case, you go and talk to the detective who is now retired, who worked on it in the early days. If you're doing a news report about it, or you're actually a police officer, U.S. Marshal or FBI, and you're looking into a cold case, you go back and talk to the guy who used to cover the case, right? So in the case of Fusion GPS, they hire Steele, who has a lot of contacts in Russia, many of whom are ex-spies or people who had turned, or people who are just knowledgeable about that, and was gathering information for the Washington Free Beacon on behalf of being paid by Fusion GPS. After the Washington Free Beacon decided to ditch their principles and jump on the Trump coattails, here was this opposition research paper that was sitting around, and the Clinton campaign paid Fusion GPS to complete it or to buy it essentially from them. Like, you already completed this work, we'll buy it from you and just see what's in it or whatever. The campaign, by the way, never released it. It was released to BuzzFeed through another source. But the point being is that in the course of hiring a company to do opposition research and knowing that the person that you are doing opposition research on has sketchy foreign connections, you are going to hire someone with knowledge of those sketchy foreign connections to go investigate those sketchy foreign connections and then come back to you with information on those foreign sketchy connections. That is very different because, A, you're paying that person, you're paying a company that hires this person through them to gather it, and then they have to vet it if it's legit information or not, because they're selling it to you, and what you're buying from them is legitimate opposition research. If they just go and hire a bunch of dudes, like you can hire one of these, in India, you can hire one of these virtual secretaries or virtual assistant programs, and you can ask them to do a report for you on God knows what topic you want. If you're researching a stock or something, you can hire them to do it. Well, if the report they come back with is a bunch of gibberish that they've just compiled and is useless to you, why would you pay for that? And why would anybody else especially pay for that from you if it's not verifiable? So in creating the Steele dossier, Fusion GPS had their reputation and their value on the line as an opposition research company. And they can say part of this is verified, some of it isn't. We know this, we don't know this. And they present it to you as such, which is what the dossier in many ways does. The fascinating part about the response from the Republicans is that's collusion, because Steele was an MI6 agent who had connections in Russia and asked them for what's the skinny, what's the dirt on Trump from them. That's what Democrats committing collusion is. Meanwhile, Russia, the government of Russia, through both financial and intelligence means, is through evidence within the Steele dossier and now through other sources, was offering monetary and intelligence support for Donald Trump's campaign as a governmental entity. So a foreign government was offering free help, not an employee hired through a second party that is coming up with documentary evidence of behavior by a candidate in another source that they're coming back and saying, this is what we found. When you talk to anybody on the street, this is what they're going to say. No, this is the government presenting their version of the truth for you to help you. Now, in some case, the idea that they wouldn't give you, that they would only have weaponized intelligence about your opponent and not you in case it goes south is an absurdity. And one of the things that I think the Trump organization has not really grasped and is haunting them, quite frankly, and what's making a bunch of the people who are Trump supporters in the government really nervous. Not the least of which is the conspicuously seeming to dance on the grave of John McCain, Lindsey Graham, who used to be, part of the gruesome twosome. He and McCain were inseparable. Or the Three Stooges that were him and and Lieberman and McCain. They were all this odd mix of relatively partisan to highly partisan on certain issues, but nonpartisan or bipartisan on other issues, that they were willing to move around in sectors to kind of power play amongst both parties to get things done. The constant argument that McCain had, which was, we've got to actually accomplish something, and regular order is very important, which is why he gave the thumbs down on the Obamacare bill, destruction bill, not necessarily because he didn't disagree with parts of it or all of it or what have you, but because it was done without regular order, and so he gave the thumbs down, and he catches a lot of flack for that. So, anyways, Lindsey Graham has just kind of thrown away every connection or any seeming respect he had for John McCain during the course of his life. In the weeks since his disappearance from regular Washington life, and then, of course, immediately after his death. So regardless, we got to take a break. We'll be back right after this. But the argument over the Steele dossier and Bruce Orr, who the president has really picked out as someone who is, I guess, meaningful in this process, or has been sort of crucial to looking into a lot of this stuff. He had the big hang up is Bruce Orr had breakfast with Christopher Steele, and Bruce Orr's wife worked for Fusion GPS, and it ties all together with this really curious thing that everybody who sees the evidence against Donald Trump suddenly becomes quite biased in their opinion about Donald Trump, where they may have not been before. And one has to wonder if that bias isn't based on something. We'll be back. It's the Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide. So, is the audio coming for me weird at all, Lady B? Ooh, I got a 0 send there for a second. That's not good. Check 1, check 2. Lady B, can you hear me? Okay. Yeah, I hear you. Does everything sound okay? Okay. Yeah, this thing has a little stronger grab than the app does, clearly. But yeah. Okay. So yeah, it was that way a little bit. It kind of fluctuates every so often, and I can't quite tell what's the cause of it, but we'll be all right. Okay. Long as it's continuous like it is sometimes. Yeah. Okay, great. Good to know. Let's see. Hold on. I want to roll back to this. Thank you, Hal Vickery, by the way, for the super chat. And our intent to purchase 666 Fifth Avenue, and a plan that will never die. We will make that happen at some point. Yes. Let's see. I'm gonna make sure I have all the info. Let's see. Tick, tick, tick. Because Matt sent it to me. There it is. Excellent. Let's see. Gotta make sure. And we're coming back in a moment. You might want to talk to forms leaked by post office. It seems designated intimidator plan mistake. Do they understand these are people that track communications from? Yes. We're going to talk about that, Edward. Yes. But thanks for the reminder. You can't run for president. I will, but I got to run for another office first. That's weird. Welcome back to the show. So, by the way, next week I'm going to be live with Johnny Million, and Lady B is going to be joining us at the House Cafe in DeKalb. It's a fantastic place, by the way. They have vegan and vegetarian food. They have great organic free trade coffee. It's a fantastic space. They are like an easy drive from Chicago, and certainly from the western suburbs. If you're out that way, we would love to see you there. It's going to be the regular show time, but we will be doing it live from the House Cafe. Do we have the address for that? I don't have it listed in my stuff, Lady B. But anyways, yeah, they have it's a great place. They have everything from open mics to yoga and capoeira classes there. This place is like a catch-all, and they've decided to catch us. So we really appreciate it. So the House Cafe in DeKalb, next Saturday, live show. Anybody who wants to join us, we would love to see you there. It'll be a fantastic time. I'm going to be I'll be there. Johnny Million will be there. It's going to be a party. And thank you, Billy Hutchins, and thank you, Hal Vickery, and thank you, Christopher Pickard, for the super chats and the YouTube right now. Every little bit helps. We are a free show, so we are everything about the show, technology-wise, and everything is the old-fashioned word listener supported. I don't want to get into that like NPR try to raise money week, but it always helps us. But there you go. The fascinating part of Trump's problem with Bruce Orr is again the factor that his wife worked for Fusion GPS, and Fusion GPS was hired by the Washington Free Beacon to look into Trump's history and come up with some opposition research so that the other Republicans who were running against him had some information they could weaponize. At that point, during the Fusion GPS attempt to gather stuff on Trump, I'm not sure that they even were able to come up with the fact, or maybe they were just strictly looking at Russia because it was so obvious, but they weren't aware that at that time the National Enquirer, under the guidance of Trump bro David Pecker, had been practicing catch and kill on numerous stories, paying for Trump dirt over the years, and then locking it away in a safe for future use, just in case either and not because they were planning on blackmailing him or anything, because God knows that never happens in the the salacious news business, but very possibly in case the value of bad news about Trump ever outweighed the value of good news about Trump. And there was there's a debate in high society circles whether keeping your enemies close because they've got mob ties, or they've got they sold you a condo on the cheap, or what have you. And this isn't just Trump, this is all of sort of the New York scene, that if you can benefit from being nice to them, and then eventually the only trouble comes for these people, and that's why it comes really fast when people drop below the line in the page 6 Inquirer TMZ world. It's because the value of the negative press about them outweighs the benefit that these people got from the good press. So, but at that point, Fusion GPS seemed so focused on what would be real crimes, mainly Russian connections, money laundering specifically, and the fact that there was the server, the Alpha Bank server pinging in Trump Tower, the Russian gangsters running prostitution and money laundering rings out of Trump Tower, what ended up being a story about Russian anchor babies in Trump Tower in Florida, just in real sort of financial crimes. That it's almost as if Fusion GPS was so fixated on that part of it that they missed all the sort of Karen McDougal storylines. And in the Carter Page world, I guess America's favorite useful idiot, looking at him as kind of being this kind of played moron who the Russians said, this guy might be a good weasel point into the campaign with George Papadopoulos and these other people who are just kind of, thinking that they're providing the candidate a service, and the candidate being open to said service more so than even people believed. That Orr had this breakfast meeting, and so this is I think this is from the Washington Post initially, but Bruce Orr spoke to House lawmakers last Tuesday, and he was talking about a Washington breakfast attended by Steele, an associate of his, and his wife, Nellie, who worked for Fusion GPS, that hired Steele. She attended at least part of the breakfast. She wasn't there the whole time. More than likely, it looks like she sat down, said hi, because Christopher Steele was going to be there. They had hired him, and she was, it was one of those things like, hey, you do work for us over there, but I barely see you. Good morning. What are you eating? And then split. Orr told Congress that Steele told him that Page, and this is kind of the new information, was an extraordinarily useful idiot, not just a useful idiot for them. A Trump campaign aide who traveled to Moscow that same month and whose ties to Russia attracted FBI scrutiny, had met with more senior Russian officials than he had acknowledged meeting with. So Carter Page had lied to Congress and lied to the FBI, and it turns out, according to what Orr is saying as of last Tuesday, that Carter Page has still more lies to walk back, apparently, and that he more than likely is going to end up getting called back in during during the next 6 weeks or so. But the breakfast took place amid ongoing FBI concerns about Russian election interference, possibly communicating with Trump associates, and possible communication. Okay, so by that point, Russian hackers had penetrated Democratic email accounts, including that of Clinton campaign chairman and Papadopoulos, the Trump campaign associate, who said to have revealed that Russians had dirt on Democrat Hillary Clinton, in the form of emails, according to court papers. The revelation prompted the FBI to open the counterintelligence investigation in July 31st, 2016, one day after the breakfast, but based on entirely different information. Orr told lawmakers he could not vouch for the accuracy of Steele's information, but has said he considered him a reliable FBI informant who delivered credible and actionable intelligence, including his investigation into corruption at FIFA, soccer's global governing body. In the interview, Orr acknowledged that he had not told superiors in his office, including Deputy Attorney General Sally Yates, about his meeting with Steele because he considered the information inflammatory raw source material. He also provided new details about the department's move to reassign him once his Steele ties were brought to light. Orr said, and this is the fascinating part, so Orr got reassigned, and the idea that the Trump administration and everybody else has been floating is that people get reassigned because they can't be trusted, that they're part of a cabal, that they are not the kind of people that they want to use as a source, or that they are somehow tied to Democrats or what have you. The fascinating thing is at the tail end of this article, which is that Orr said he met in late December 2017 with two senior justice officials, Scott Schools and James Crowell, who told him they were unhappy he did not proactively disclose his meetings with Steele. They said he was being stripped of his associate deputy attorney post as part of a planned internal reorganization. People familiar with Orr's accounts say. So they were mad that they didn't know he had talked to Steele. His wife had talked to Steele. And this just plays on that. Once the dossier came out and people were getting really nervous about what parts of it were actually being verified, they started sniffing around anybody who had actually been anywhere near it, and that's where they found Orr. This is the fascinating. He met again soon after with one of the officials who told him that Attorney Generals Jeff Sessions and Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein did not believe he could continue his current position as director of a drug grant distribution program known as the Organized Crime and Drug Enforcement Task Force. And the reason why they didn't, because that's where he got moved to. They moved him again. Why did they move him again? Sessions and Rosenstein, Orr was told, did not want him in the post because it entailed White House meetings and interaction, meaning that he was going to have to brief the president on stuff, and the president was freaking out about Orr's connection to the dossier, or his knowledge of the dossier, or his belief that it was legit. And so they didn't. It would make Trump nervous if he was in the meetings, that he would freak out. We got to take a break. We'll be back right after this. It's so much news to cover. The Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide on WCPT Radio, Chicago's Progressive Talk. WCPT820.com is the website. And, of course, the Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide, is on iTunes as a podcast, and you can listen to it there. More details after the break. Let's see. Hopefully we're at break. Are we at break, Lady B? I don't want to ditch out because I didn't hear any music coming my way. So just to make sure, we'll be back right after the break. And here's a lovely word from our sponsors, if we have any, because we're progressive radio, and it's harder for us to dig up those. You need to buy gold. The world is going to collapse, and what you need is a metal you can't use or eat. Welcome back. Yeah, we'll be back in a minute. Have fun, Rocky Mountain Mike. See, Carl. Let's see. She had to. Meghan McCain is in a natural period of profound grief, but she has no great shakes. Neither was McCain. They are not friends of progressives, however. Much Joe Biden may eulogize McCain. It isn't that they are friends of progressives. I think there's a lot being read into, because of sort of the tribalism of our current politics, that the idea is that it's not that he was a friend to progressives in any way, but that he was open to the idea that there should be, collaboration across the aisle, which has become a dirty word, quite frankly. We'll talk about that a little bit later in the show, but anytime you're like, we need to be able to reach across the aisle, everybody's like, whoa, never, and I just don't think that's healthy. And the amazing part is that, a lot of people who are living in the basement or spare room of their conservative parents will decry any interaction with the enemy, or liberal parents with a conservative kid who lives in their house, and this like, never give any ground. Mom, we're out of mac and cheese. It's I don't trust anybody who doesn't believe that there is wiggle room in all philosophies, and you have to give to get sometimes, and that's where it gets really hard to, because my feeling about like Ocasio-Cortez or any of those people are fantastic. I'm so glad that they're gaining ground, but if she doesn't get elected to the actual office, it's all for nothing. And so I will take as progressive a person as can get elected in that district. And those districts, if it's the difference between a, quote, corporate Dem and a Republican in any district, I'll take the corporate Dem any time, because at least they can be negotiated with, in theory, whereas the Republican is going to increasingly simply be, yes, Lady B, I hear you coming back. Cool. The Republican is simply going to be a line tower for the most extreme aspects of their party as they get led further and further down this path. So tribalism is almost entirely a GOP phenomenon. I disagree. That's not true. And we have a lot of tribalism we have to deal with on our side as well. We absolutely have tribalism. Buzz is very light, doesn't obstruct running. Okay, good. Welcome back to the show. It's the Hal Sparks radio program, Mega Worldwide on WCPT Radio, Chicago's Progressive Talk. And, I mean, there's a lot of things we're celebrating today, not the least of which is apparently the Mueller investigation is over. Did you know that? Yeah, apparently it's over. According to Rudy Giuliani, it ended today because it has to, because he says so, because he was promised such a thing, and then it just did, which, by the way, it hasn't. But and that Trump's got a new thing to celebrate and brag about on Twitter, that he's hit 60%. He hit 60%. It's disapproval rating, but that didn't stop him from touting his 56% disapproval rating as an approval rating last week. He was like, yeah, and saying that he was more popular than Abraham Lincoln. And I'm guessing it's in Republican polling that he was talking about. I don't know. He's like, did they have polling when Honest Abe was around? If they had the polling, then clearly I'm more popular than, I think we could say easily. We can say it. Yeah, you can say it because you make up everything. Why not make this up too? We can say I'm more popular than Honest Abe. And it does. By the way, this is one of those areas where I kind of agree with Donald Trump. I don't disagree for a second that Donald Trump is more popular among the Republican Party today than Abraham Lincoln is, because a good portion of the insurgent Republican Party these days is kind of against all the things that Lincoln made happen. There, you got a bunch of segregationists and a bunch of closet Confederates, bragging now, coming out of the closet within the Republican Party. I'm certain that Abraham Lincoln is not one of their favorite Republicans in history. So, So in this modern group of Republicans, I don't doubt that they think much more highly of Donald Trump than they think of Abraham Lincoln. And they certainly, the irony that he's going, I'm more popular than Honest Abe, just means that the modern Republican Party obviously is a bigger fan of someone who is an outright liar than anyone who has the word honest attached to their name in any respect. So, this week we obviously in losing John McCain and last weekend there, basically right after we had finished the show, they announced that he was ending his treatment for the same cancer that killed him. By the way, 9 years to the day that killed Senator Kennedy, Ted Kennedy, and then that also killed Joe Biden's son. That this particular brain cancer consumed John McCain, and they announced that he was going to end his treatment, and within 24 hours, maybe 36, he had passed away. And it is the state of our politics that the aspects of John McCain's history that we in bringing up the most positive aspects, celebrating those things, in not a way of whitewashing his life, but in saying this was the part of his life to be most heralded, and that's often what we do. There's a in-death hypocrisy that everyone makes a joke of, especially in politics or whatnot, that we sort of forget people's negatives and play up their positives in death, which I actually think for the most part in life is a good thing. Except in the situation where you're just kind of making crimes vanish. The idea that someone you had a genuine political disagreement with, but elements of their life and elements of their philosophy and elements of their ethic were worth celebrating. By celebrating those things, you make a public statement that these are the things we believe in life. That in death, like a message to all people, if you want to be remembered positively in death, you might want to pick up these traits. The negative traits, we might forget some of them, as long as they don't outnumber the good parts. But these are the things that we want you to actually, foster in your life. And one of the things that got played up this week, and I obviously tweeted about it, and one of my favorite moments in John McCain's life, which was, the moment where the crazy, Tea Party lady, I don't trust Obama, he's an Arab, and McCain said, no ma'am, he's a fine family man that I just happen to have political disagreements with. And some people jumped on this like, oh, you can't be a fine man and be an Arab, and that's clearly not what McCain was saying. And I think as an adult, we can look at the fact that where this woman was coming from is that Obama's lying about his Christianity, lying about his ethnicity, lying about his heritage, lying about his humanity, and trying to present a false version of himself in an effort to get elected. And what Trump was responding to was, no, ma'am, what that Alex Jones BS that you are buying into is crap. He's a good man. What he is saying about himself is true. The fact that he is a Christian and the fact that he has respect for Muslims is, both of those things are true aspects of Obama's character. It's not that he's a hidden Muslim, that he is lying about, he's a Manchurian candidate for a new form of 9/11. That's what McCain was responding to. and ethically and decently doing so in that moment. And so all the kind of like word parsing pushback that came of that, I think is is a disingenuous attack on the man, and I think it is in our best interests to recognize those moments in life, those moments in in people's behavior where their shining self comes forward. However, even awkwardly or or unclearly, even that when people make their best attempt to be their best selves, we need to give them as wide a space to do that as possible. And so the kind of tightening around that, I have a real problem with. So I celebrated that this week, and I celebrate McCain for having that moment. However, and I didn't like his singing the bomb Iran thing. I didn't like his willingness to scuttle his ethics and not bring on who he wanted to bring on as a running mate in the form of Joe Lieberman as an independent, or in this kind of rebuke of partisan stuff. I'm no fan of Lieberman. I think he was a mistake for Gore to go with. But at the same time, that does not undermine the service that the man did to his country, and the fact that he was at least coming from an ethical belief that he thought was worthwhile. That he probably in no means, he was, this is a man you have to understand, had lost the primary years before to the man who was president for the last 8 years, whose, father had brought on Dan Quayle, the quintessential moronic vice president, the sort of useless, clean cut, they almost just, all right, this guy's too dumb to have any ideas of his own, and if I die because I'm old in office, the young guy will just play out the instructions until you guys can elect somebody for real. Kind of, VP. And that was there'd been a history of that to some degree. And I think McCain fell into thinking, well, it'll be all right. And here's my party presenting a woman for the first time. Maybe that's a great step forward. And in many ways, it was. It was a problem with who that woman was. But the act of doing it could have been a great step forward. So this is, when you start unpacking anyone's humanity, I think it speaks more about you as a human being than it does about them, because they're dead. They're gone. And the parts of their personality you allow to celebrate, or you act towards celebrating, is more indicative of who, you are than who they were. And I think by celebrating this week the bipartisanship that McCain showed, by celebrating those moments that he had that were intrinsically different than his current, than almost the entire current stable of Republicans, you send a message, a signal that has worth in our world. And I think that's a good thing. And thank you, for giving to the Hal Sparks Needs More Guitars Fund. These, by the way, these aren't my guitars on the walls. These are bandmates' guitars. These are, you can tell because they have whammy bars. Homie, don't go there. So, this is, an aspect of the funerals that we've sadly gone through over the last couple of years, where we're celebrating, and, obviously the Queen, Aretha Franklin, passing away, having in many ways like a royal salute that she deserved in Detroit. And not looking back on whatever troubles she'd had in her life as indicative of, why her music and her life doesn't have meaning, but why it does. And why we all can relate, and why the soul that shone forth in her music, that gave it the depth that it had, that resonated with people's lives was not because it was a pure example of the emotions to cry in the music, but because it because of its questioning of itself throughout her, her life, that her own life experience, sometimes was in conflict with the words that she sang, and that's what brought forth the depth in the singing that she gave, and why all of us, with our own self-doubts and our own, questionable moments of our own ethic and our recognition of our own dark side in moments, and our lack of forgiveness, our inability to move past grudges and what have you, can inform the depth of our character. If we choose in those moments not to say, well, those are parts of me that I will just allow to fly because that's natural to me, instead of going, no, civilization is a constant act, and the civilization of my character is very important. And you have Aretha Franklin in the arts and John McCain, in politics, in some ways as examples of that, because what Aretha Franklin had to go through just to have a career in the time that she grew up in, and in the in the early parts of her life especially, is a weight many people who live today couldn't even imagine bearing, just to have a career. In the same way that John McCain went through something as a prisoner of war that most people can't ever picture experiencing in their own life. And because of that, they both deserve our respect in death and our reflection on the best parts of them in reflecting on ourselves. And that kind of that's the gift that comes from legends passing. And I think it behooves us to look at it from that perspective and go, how do I make the best parts of those people become, align with the best parts of myself? How do I earn the respect of the best parts of those people? And recognize that their flaws are as real as my flaws, but we all work to move past our flaws and better ourselves. We'll be back right after this at the Housemarks Radio program, Mega Worldwide. Let's see. Aretha actually picked up the phone and talked to people and did it often. We need to do that more. I knew Aretha's memorial would be at least 4 hours, but then I read the program and knew it was going to be at least 7 hours. It actually lasts about 9.5 hours. Absolutely. I mean, effectively, it was a wake in a lot of ways. Let's see. I was surprised at how long the Aretha Franklin funeral lasted. Really. Irish funerals go on and on as well. Different cultures handle death differently. And there's a lot, there's an intermingling of culture in the United States, a fusion that informs all of it. It's not the bifurcation of that, and it's not special to that. It's what did you like about Aretha Franklin music, Hal? Well, where to start? Obviously, what stood out about Aretha was, she had a very original vocal sound. Her voice and her inflection and her vibrato and her tonality and the clean rasp on her voice, all fused together in a very unique sound. In a world that's saturated with would-be R&B divas and would-be R&B stars, and this is not just true of R&B. Obviously, the same thing is true of like quintessential country singers, like Willie Nelson, for example. Versus the kind of generic auto-tune vocal stylings, what passes for a country vocalist today, and the uniformity of that vocalization. Hers was incredibly distinct. And that had both to do with the volume of singing she had done in her life and the effect it had on the maturation of her vocal cords and her life experience fusing perfectly. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they're uneven in a person. Welcome back to the show. So, by the way, in talking about a lot of these, the stories of the week with, obviously, Patton and the big step forward that happened this week in the Manafort related criminal trials, the pleading guilty of literally. Another Manafort associate, but not just another Manafort associate. There was a very specific element to Patton's guilty plea and his, pleading guilty to the violation of the FAIR Act, the foreign agent, that in his plea, which is, by the way, we've heard this now from several people that these unregistered foreign agents are having to rewrite their. I mean, for Christ's sake, the Jared's security clearance papers just having to be rewritten, like revising questions, all that stuff. Thank you, Sixes, in the chat room for that super chat. That we've almost gotten kind of normalized to how many people, from Mike Flynn and all these people that have either pled guilty or admitted to being an unregistered foreign agent and having to revise their FARA documents, or quite frankly, lying to the FBI or lying to Congress and having to face, criminal liability over this. Well, in the case of this guy Patton, there's one major thing that's very different than him just saying he was lobbying on behalf of a foreign entity. In this case, Konstantin Kalimnik and the Ukrainian political party that strung up after Yanukovych, was driven out. The Russian sympathetic, Russian plant, essentially, as president of Ukraine. When he was driven out, and he created this opposition party, and here's this guy Patton, along with Manafort and these other people who are under the radar, lobbying for and doing, showing up on CNN, showing up on Fox News repeatedly, writing op-ed pieces to benefit this opposition group, and not telling people that they were paid to do such. That's become almost a kind of hack premise within the Trump circles. Is that there's dozens of these people, it seems. The different part about this was when Patton was busted over this, this is the first time we've really seen a monetary connection really play out in the, besides Manafort's obviously, back and forth. Like, he's obviously the big one. And this may come out more in his FARA trial, obviously. But in his financial trial in the Southern District of New York, it was obvious he was taking money from foreign industries. He was not, basically telling, it wasn't showing up on his taxes. It wasn't showing up through his accounting. But there was a huge deal in a very different aspect to the Patton story, which was this payment that was made into the Trump Inaugural Fund. Now, the Trump Inaugural Fund has been a sketchy, dangerous aspect of the Trump story for all parties concerned within the Trump circle, because there's a bunch of missing money. They raised twice as much money as other inaugurals. Like twice as much as Obama's, and they spent basically the same amount as Obama's, even though they clearly didn't need as much space or as much security, because of the volume of people was significantly smaller. But in the case of, Donald Trump raising this money, it was a big question, like, well, where'd it go? And so far, they're not talking. They gave it to a friend of Melania's, 23 million or some nonsense, for, table settings and parties. But Patton arranged for this, this foreign entity, called up a buddy in the States and said, hey, do me a favor, can you write a check to the inaugural fund, and we're going to reimburse you. And that's illegal. You can't do that. That would be I guess, if somebody who buys a gun for somebody who's not allowed to buy a gun is a straw purchase, this is a straw donation, I guess. But essentially, and I have a feeling that we're going to find out that some of this money that was reimbursed to AMI, or possibly paying off porn stars or maybe others, that some of that money that was initially taken out of other sources was reimbursed through that missing inaugural funds. It seems like the most logical place to do. And granted, it's not like the Trump organization and the Trump family has any problem using charity funds to pay their legal bills and to pay their to pay off porn stars and to pay off when their golf courses have been fined. They'll pilfer any number of donations from other people that because, by the way, the Trump organization and the Trump charity has a fantastic history of taking charity money from other people, stamping their name on it, just like he does with buildings, like calling something Trump Tower when really it was built and designed and is owned by other people, and just has a branding. They just label it like it's a T-shirt. That they purchased. Like I sell merch T-shirts when I'm on the road, and they're my T-shirts because they have my logo and screen printing on them. But American Apparel or some equivalent thereof made the shirt, and so I made those T-shirts the same way Trump owns Trump Tower. You know what I mean? I may have created the logo, but the ink and the shirt, started someplace else. So in the case about this guy Patton, there's genuinely a new level to this particular point. This is in many ways a new chapter, and it did come in the Friday before this supposed September 1st deadline as both a signal to Rudy Giuliani and everyone else that this is not done. The Mueller investigation is not finished. As a matter of fact, this is a new chapter. We have followed the money, and we have located some of it, and it came from Russia and ended up in the Trump inaugural fund. And this is just the tip of this. This is just the slight, a warning, a shot across the bow, as it were. And if they go, we got to take a break. But if the Mueller campaign, or the Mueller investigation goes silent about what happened in the campaign over the next, 60 days before the election, the day after the election, it's going to get real noisy. We'll be back. It's the House Parks Radio program, Mega Worldwide on WCPT Radio, Chicago's Progressive Talk. Now for the news. Yeah. I do too, Hunter. I miss Lab Rats. It was a good time. That was so fun. Trump licenses his name to go on buildings. Yeah, that's the majority of his actual holdings these days, because he doesn't own a lot of the buildings anymore. Currently reading Lies. My teacher told me everything your American history textbook got wrong. All right. I'm a big fan of don't know much about history too. Nobody mentions how John McCain couldn't remember how many homes that he owned while millions were losing their only homes. total disconnect between the wealthy politicians and the rest of us. Yeah, I mean, he got a lot of flack about what and understand this. Bernie Sanders is a millionaire. I think all senators are millionaires. I don't know that there's not a senator who's a millionaire. But in the case of John McCain and I don't know how many houses they own, because they had investment properties as well. And, you open a can of worms if you start going, people start digging into what houses you own, and you rent them out to people, but suddenly your political enemies are knocking on the door of somebody who rents from you in a property you purchased as a rental property. What God knows what. Anyways, it's not that weird, especially a man of his advancing age who may have bought and sold homes over the years, may have had multiple homes, or maybe just had two, like Canadians all have a cabin. They all got they go up to the cabin on the weekend, whatever. But he at one point said, what's rich in the United States? And he said $5 million. And when, the average worker is making, 36 to, 60, and, as far as, single and and dual family households, that's a lot of money to say that's what you have to get before you're rich. Because, what about people who make $150,000 a year? That's a lot of money. So why, those people are rich? Well, only if it lasts. And the case, the number that McCain quoted as $5 million is a fairly common number in economic circles, which is your never have to go below it number. If you hit $5 million in the United States, you can live off the interest of that or the investment income from that, and it's a balance between what your investment income will be and what you take out of it, and you can live in the sort of $80,000 to $150,000 range as far as lifestyle. Meaning you don't have to work too hard. You can retire. You can you can have a condo in Florida or a timeshare. You can live elsewhere. You can have your home, and you can have you can send your kids to college. You can have 2 kids, and you can have 2 cars in your garage and that kind of stuff. And $5 million is the number you never have to drop below. So if you ever reach $5 million, the interest itself will keep you above that number, and you won't have to eat into it unless you have a catastrophic illness or something like that. So that $5 million number is not special to McCain, and it's not that uncommon. Obviously, people are well-to-do, in the United States, compared to other people in the world, even at almost the impoverished level. But our version of poverty versus their version of poverty, that's, not that that's a standard worth seeking, but in that case, that $5 million number is not weird for him to come up with out of the blue. It is, and what it is it was almost a sad thing that $5 million is the permanent economic safety number, which is almost unattainable by most Americans. I have the book, How read parts of it. It's not weird that ordinary people, it's not that weird for ordinary people anywhere who are reasonably prosperous. Yeah, well, and especially because you hear about, those, janitors who saved every penny, worked their whole life, and then when they retired, they had $6 million. That's what the result of that stuff comes from. All that, they go by that number. Once they reach that point, they were able to give away almost all of their income past a certain point because they'd reached the $5 million point, which paid all their bills forever, and also put their kids through school. So it's doable even on a low income, depending on how skimpily you're willing to live and what your standard of living is in the state or the place you live versus what your wage is. And so that's where that came from. So was he out of touch? Probably. I think all senators are out of touch. Looks like Bernie made his $1 million and just barely last year from his... I agree that, but he made his $1 million last year, but he has millions. He's worth millions, is my point. He's not a millionaire because he makes it every year. He's a millionaire because he has millions. Yes, you're correct. Tammy Duckworth is not a millionaire. That's an excellent point, Carrie. We'll be back in a second. Welcome back. You know, as we get caught up in Trump's kind of lack of humanity in the face of, you know, not just the death of John McCain, but also in the death of Aretha Franklin, because that whole, like, crap about she worked for me a lot was just, I found grotesque. Like the worth of someone is based on, you know, if whether or not Trump has hired them. Or like, yeah, she was so good, you could tell she was good because I paid her money to do something. His response was just cheap and indicative of someone with major like ego issues and and a penchant for deciding people's worth through his, you know, their value in his life. So in terms of, you know, the other stories that are kind of going on, there's a bunch of stories that I don't know have gotten the attention they deserve, and I think it's oftentimes it's hard to latch on to what you think is the worst one, because right now, and this is so important leading into the elections that are coming up. It's so many people, you know. I think the quote was from Lyndon Johnson. He said, "What's the difference between a lefty and a cannibal?" He said, "A cannibal won't eat his best friend." A cannibal won't eat his friends, you know. And there is an element to which, you know, that infighting and backbiting and, you know, kind of the, well, both sides do it, and there's no real difference between the parties, and both siderism has been, you know, ugly and in play for quite some time. And there are people who it seems are almost paid to do it. And in looking at the you know, the progressive candidates who are really making moves in certain districts that have been safely Democratic for a very long time, and then the more conservative Dems in areas where anybody less conservative than them wouldn't go near it. And again, I've said this before, I'll say it again, I will take the most conservative Dem in the world over a Republican in any district. If they can get elected, I know they can be counted on for certain elements of the, you know, of the party platform, and they can be moved on others. And you can have an entire genuine political conversation from liberal to conservative within the Democratic Party without the need for Republicans at all, because they are off the friggin' rails these days. So I will take, you know, the Democrat that can get elected in any district. Because I know as human beings, even when they have conservative beliefs that are, you know, too conservative for me, that I can at least believe on some level they came by them legitimately. That it's a philosophical difference, or it's graft and we can get rid of them. But it's not this kind of, it's not based on this, you know, ethno-nationalist, psychotic, you know, Stephen Miller vein of, you know, of there's only us and them, or the small government conservatives who want a government so small, you know, that you can drown it in a bathtub, which, by the way, our economic and political enemies in the world would like nothing better than. And again, there's a lot to be said for efficient government. There's a lot to be said for streamlined government in some ways, but the idea that you want small government just to shrink it down is simply just an undermining of the value of this country, because we are a large country with a lot of influence in the world, and that requires a decent-sized government to make sure that it doesn't fall apart. And so there you go. So one of the stories, and this ties into so much of what we talked about like the, you know, it does matter who is in office. This idea that it doesn't matter, everybody's bought and paid for, and there's no difference, and it's just a label, and Democrats and Republicans are the same people. Is a baseline absurdity. It's false. It's a false premise. It is absolutely a lie. It is a bias towards the political process or democracy that people allow themselves to have simply to excuse their own laziness for not voting, or to externalize their own individual paranoia out onto another group of people, you know, and just kind of, you know, but it's it's the on the right it's the Alex Jonesing of the world, on the left it's the Jimmy Doring of the world. But it's basically this idea to excuse yourself from having to engage in the political experience for more than one cycle at a time. And again, I've said this before, revolution is the 6-minute abs of American democracy. You have to treat this place like you're paying a mortgage on this country, not as a renter. And there's an element of, like, a renter is like, if I'm either out or I'll burn this place to the ground. And while I'm living here, I don't really care what happens to it. And that's really damaging. So one of the big stories that I think is indicative of, there is a huge difference between who's running things and things that would not have happened had Hillary Clinton become president. In the same way that I believe we would have had a different response to 9/11 had Al Gore been president, and I will stand by that to my dying day. And anybody who says we'd have still been is a maniac. In one of the most obvious ones is the treatment of migrant children being separated from their parents. And we have these reports that, over a month after the deadline, there's 500 children, including 23 toddlers, who are separated from their families and may never be returned. And in some cases where the parents have literally disappeared so that they can't be returned to them because it's so dangerous if they try to go back, or it's so dangerous in the areas of Mexico where they are hanging out until they can, maybe by phone contact their child at some point in the future, years from now, that it is so dangerous that to have their child, put back with them, no matter what happens to them in our system, it's still better than what will happen there, which is a horrifying choice to have to make in your life. And any parent will tell you that that's just, it'll set your skin on fire thinking that that's the possibility. Okay, so the running, aspect of this has also been, by the way, the DACA recipients, that the delayed action for dreamers, Trump with a swipe of his pen tries to eliminate it, and court ruling after court ruling has told him, no, you can't do it. You can't call people out of the shadows and say you're safe. You can come out. The same aspect of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. This is why it ultimately, people who were against the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, the reason they knew it was because once you tell people it is okay to be open about who you are, you can't therefore say later, no, it isn't, and you're going to lose your job, because that you have violated the trust set forth in the legal system. And so you can't, that toothpaste is not going back in the tube. And there's an element of DACA that's what has protected it as well, is that once you tell people, here's the rules, if you come through and you were in this period and you were this age during the time that you were brought in, and you were under an age where your parents, brought you in, and you as a minor had no control over where your life was, you have some pathway to citizenship because this is the only country you know. And in some ways, you may even only speak English because of where you lived. So dropping you off in Guatemala with no connection to society or family there would be a death sentence. And especially if you have done nothing wrong, or you have served in the military, or any number of things. So, the idea that, Trump willy-nilly decides, as his attitude towards DACA recipients is one of disgust and informed by the racism of people in his administration like Stephen Miller and his ilk, with a stroke of his pen, these people got to go, right? And DACA recipients are people who came here when they were, at the highest end when they were, let's say, 15, 16 years old, which Republicans and conservatives have made the case that that's an area where we have tried kids as adults in this country, so they have the same culpability in their legal status as adults, and that's too old and they should be sent back. But if you came here when you were 15 or 14 years old, if we could try a 12-year-old for murder in Florida, then anybody older than 12 years old who was brought here by their parents shouldn't qualify for DACA, and we should be able, by the stroke of the pen, to eliminate that just based on the legal proceeding. Like, that's the belief system we're dealing with. But they are using as their point that there is some element of adulthood in a child that and let's not even go into with out of pain of like losing track of that that there are sex offenders in these that they've caught trying to work in these detention facilities around children, and I can't believe they caught them all. I don't believe that due diligence has been done. So every single day that this goes on is horrifying for these children, and even still, with the family separation that we're talking about. Well, now we got to take a break. We have been litigating for the last few months the family separation and the detention of children, and how to handle it. And there is a case to be made for the difference between people who are trying to economic migrants versus people who are seeking asylum. And there is absolutely a legal reason why there is a difference between those two statuses of human beings who are coming to the United States, as it is in any country. And this idea that liberals are for open borders and just kind of free flow and it doesn't matter does matter, and that's why it does matter when you're an asylum seeker, and that's why we should take special care for people who are asylum seekers, because of the danger that is they experience in their in their home. That being said, there is a news story coming out of the southern border states of the weaponization of immigration services that I find we should have been warned by how Trump treated Obama. He has now turned birtherism into a policy position. We'll be right back after this. The House Sparks Radio program, mega worldwide on WCPT Radio, Chicago's Progressive Talk. Okay, bottom of his class at Naval Academy, Obama top of his class at Harvard. That's the difference between Republicans and Dems. Dems are high achievers. That's true. I mean, and of course, it speaks to the racial differentiation of what the standard is for and has been for white Americans versus black Americans in a lot of cases. And it's the Bush C student becomes president of the United States. Obama like top of his class. There's people will argue that we will have parity when a C student black man can become president, and I would argue that we will have parity when the white men who are running for office have to be at the same quality level as Obama was. That we don't lower the standard for everyone; we raise the standard to somebody who is genuinely worth the office, and Obama being a prime example of that. And the other thing, too, is McCain being bottom of his class at the Naval Academy also did not speak to his value as a human being, because his courage under torture, his experience in how he went forward in life, it may have played on how he understood economic policy, and may have played into the fact that that's what made him a conservative versus a liberal, or a Republican versus a Democrat in his political upbringing. That it very well may have been that he was a bad student, and therefore he didn't understand some of the complexities of some of the bigger issues, and that's why he ended up sort of siding with Republicans in a lot of ways over time, because the faux intellectualism and sort of an inability to grasp the long-term chess-like moves of an economy might be why simplistic approaches apply. The extremes of both parties have a tendency to paint with a broad brush, but there's a much narrower extremist field in the Democratic Party. Loud as they are, yeah, thank you. But in terms of it may have explained why he was there. But as a human being, his value didn't come in how good of a student he was. So, welcome back to the show. There's been a policy due to a legal issue that came up, some cases that were filed in the 90s, that some midwives on southern border states were falsifying birth certificates for children that were actually born in Mexico and saying that they were born in the United States. Like the idea that they were, that anchor babies that were not technically born on U.S. soil, they were falsifying those papers. In some cases, turned out to be that way. And legally, if that happens, you are not a U.S. citizen, right? And over, the course of, there were a few cases about that. And it is the legal precedent of this country and every other country that that has the birthright citizenship or what have you, that if you're born in this country you are given birthright citizenship. But if you are not born in this country, you can't just get it because you've been snuck across the border or something, and using forged documents to get citizenship is not legal. And so some of those cases have been handled because of that, and they will come up, and that will happen not just to Hispanic citizens. It will happen, to some of these, Russian women in Trump Tower in Miami, and some Canadians who go across the border, if that's how they want to do it. It does not only happen down there, but where in that area where midwiving, because of the illegal status of perhaps parents or relatives, midwiving and being birthed at home is, there's more of a trend of it on the southern border. And this is, for those of you that are horrified by family separation and are also disgusted by the Trump administration's attitude towards DACA recipients, people who are what I would call undocumented Americans. There is a new report that the Trump administration is doubting the U.S. citizenship of Latinos born in the area and around the southern border and denying passports. Joaquin Castro of Texas is saying it represents an unacceptable targeting of people based on their ethnic heritage. It violates the Constitution. It should be investigated by Congress in both chambers, and we should take action to stop it as soon as possible through legislation if necessary. Earlier this week, the Washington Post reported that the Trump administration has been relitigating decades-old claims that midwives from the southern border region had provided false documentation to children they delivered, and is now using those accusations, not guilty findings, the accusations themselves, to question the citizenship of hundreds, possibly thousands of Latinos in the area. Lawyers also say that some people who have been denied passports have landed in deportation proceedings. Now, for those of us that believe, and this is a wide belief, bipartisan, that DACA recipients deserve special protection because they have been here since they were children. Right? The idea is that their parents brought them across the border, and by no fault of their own, when they were 2, 10, 5 years old, what have you, that they did not, they were not aware of why they were moving. They didn't have any control over the circumstance. They certainly say, I'm 9 years old, I'm staying in Guatemala, and I'm not coming to the United States. That's illegal. They couldn't make an ethical or legal decision on their own as minors. And there's a constant, a pretty wide-held belief across, both, Republicans and Democrats across the country that DACA recipients deserve, a special classification and should have a pathway to citizenship that perhaps even their parents don't. Like, if you even have conservatives who are like, okay, but their parents knew, so their parents got to go home, but they can stay because they've only known the United States. Like, that would be the extreme. And the Democratic side would be, okay, their parents brought them here, but they've raised their kids. Their kids are Americans. Their parents should be able to stay. There's no reason why their parents should be sent home. Those kind of things, right? But in the case of these people, we're literally talking about babies, infants, people who are beyond DACA status, beyond the idea that they were brought here when they were, 2 or 10 or 7 or 16 or what have you, but are literally were days, hours, weeks old. And this is just, and that's not even including the people who are actually born here who are being denied, which is unconstitutional and illegal, denied their rightful citizenship. They can't get a passport. They're being denied, validation of their birth documentation. These people were even younger than people we think of as DACA. Many of whom, including in one case, a former soldier in Brownsville, Texas, had his passport application denied twice, even after submitting it to, he had to go back and find these hard to locate documents, which were, hospital documents that corroborated the midwife report and all that stuff. He had to bring all this stuff to the government. The soldier, even after submitting hard to locate documents requested by the government, soldier or not, this shouldn't be happening to any American citizen. It is another telltale sign, said Sheila Jackson Lee of Texas, of the administration trying to block legal immigration and citizens just because they happen to be Hispanic or Muslim. And that's tragic, and it's not America. Government officials who violate the law or Constitution will not be immune to legal consequences, said Ruben Gallego of Arizona. Trump's war on Latino Americans is getting even uglier, tweeted Senator Jeff Merkley of Oregon. What happened to unalienable rights? This particular story has kind of been bumping along under the, in the background. And I find particularly horrifying because they are literally targeting, if you think they have disdain, or they might even come around on DACA, sweep that illusion away. I mean, let go your vice-like grip that Donald Trump and anybody in his administration is going to soften their stance on DACA or come around on that idea. Don't fool yourself or think that any Republicans in the House especially or the Senate are going to, back off allowing him to do this. Because not only are they turning a blind eye to and a deaf ear to the legitimate reasoning behind why a person brought here when they are 2 years old is an American on many fronts, or should be allowed to have a pathway to citizenship where they do not have to operate in the shadows, where they can come out of the shadows, they can pay taxes, they can be a part of it. They may not be able to vote until they become a full citizen. I'm fine with that as a ruling, blah, blah, blah. But a path to this, because they are legitimate members of our American society. They have lived nowhere else as human beings, as cognizant, they have entered into their entire cognitive years beyond being 2, 5, 7 years old as Americans in American society. And while that seems natural to every Democrat I have ever met, and most Republicans, allegedly, according to polling, and certainly most that I've talked to, most of the people that I've talked to who are conservative or view themselves as Republicans are open to the idea of DACA, understand that the people who are supporting, and right now, Donald Trump has a 90% approval rating or 85% approval rating among Republicans. Yet he has a 60% disapproval rating with all of the United States, which tells me that the Republican Party and people who identify as Republicans is an ever-shrinking group. That instead of saying, there are, in any given space, there are, for every 10,000 Democrats. Oh, sorry. I went robotic. Am I getting better, though? Does it sound better now? Is it normalized? No. Well, we've got to take a break anyways. We'll be back right after this. It's the Hal Sparks Radio program, mega worldwide on WCPT Radio, Chicago's Progressive Talk. We'll be back right after this. Dropped frames per second. Oh, somebody jumped on the internet or something. Now it's cleaner. Oh. Yeah. Hold on one second. We'll see if we get a little better. How long of a break do I have? Okay, cool. Chat room, hold on for 1 second. I'm going to go check and make sure somebody in the house isn't, playing Xbox all of a sudden and deciding to pull what little bandwidth I have. Be right back. Enjoy this playthrough. Okay. It's a natural drop. Welcome back, buddy. I'll be right there with you in a second. I'm going. Should I disconnect and reconnect, Lady B? Try that. Can you understand me now? Yeah. So, it comes back up and then it ditches out or whatever. Nope. Now we're going good. Now it's better. Okay. It drops down to like next to 0 for some reason, and the same thing is true of the live stream or whatever. Like it got junky there for a second, and I'm not quite sure why. Guys, yeah. Yeah, it's funny. It almost knows when I'm going to break. It's kind of spooky. Or it only works in like 30-minute chunks, and then it panics. But hopefully, yeah, should be good. And just the data rate due to low internet bandwidth. Okay, so hopefully the internet thing. I mean, I'm always taxing my internet out the whiz-wang, anyways. So, welcome back, Lord Dracul. Camden wouldn't do something like that. No, he doesn't play Xbox, and he certainly doesn't play by himself. Sometimes, true story, I will, I let Camden play video games, but I only play with him, and I think that's a very important aspect of that you keep it social. So you can play a sports game, or we play like Lego Avengers or something like that, but we play together. So we team up for stuff, and then we're talking while we do it. So it's still a form of, creative play and interacting with a human being, Yeah. Cool. Mhm. I think some people. I'm just reading back on chat stuff. Did anyone else see the King William Alexander? Welcome back to the House Parks Radio program, Mega Worldwide, now with even more weirdly distorted background music or whatever, transition music. So I think it's important, in that we get caught up in the, and I do think, here's the thing, I think it's important to cover every aspect of Trump's Russia problems, because I think that is the easiest way, both his financial dealings and his ethical dealings with the Russians and their, helping his campaign cheat its way into office, the financial, underpinnings of his entire empire being, sketchy as all get out. All that's important. And I also think that the legal ramifications of it should be followed, the Manafort trial and all that kind of stuff. At the same time, we can also follow the policy stories that are going on that almost use that as cover. So you've got, that story I was just talking about where the U.S. is denying passports to Americans along the border, throwing their citizenship into question. This is Trump's birtherism as national policy. For anybody who believed that Trump's disdain or hatred of Obama was simply limited to Obama and not anybody else he sees as different or less than, this should be the eye opener. Because all illusions about DACA have to go away, that he's going to somehow come around on it or that he'll be open to the idea, what have you, whatever. If he is willing to say that people who are born here, or let's say somebody legitimately was born in Mexico and the others, and brought across the border at a month old, at days old, and had a midwife forged their birth certificate so that they could live here, that person doesn't qualify as a DACA recipient is insanity. I mean, you could argue that a 12-year-old is aware that his parents are faking documents for school or have to have a conversation with him because, look, we just got here and you have to do this and this or we're going to get in trouble. But a baby, honestly. So let us as we recognize that all of Trump's footsie with dictators, his violent rhetoric that led to an Encino Man, which it sounds so funny, threaten the Boston Globe with murder, calling them using all the buzzwords the president uses about the press. All that matters, and it more than likely will be brought to an end by him being impeached based on his connections, his Russian ties, and his money laundering. That's the best way to get him. You're not going to impeach Donald Trump or get him out of office or limit his time in office or limit his control over the legal process or putting somebody on the Supreme Court after Kavanaugh, which he again, there's hundreds of documents that they want to see about Kavanaugh that the Senate Republicans don't want to release, which I don't understand how that's not public knowledge, but we'll get to that some other time. But if you think Donald Trump is going to be stopped by any of those legal questions, by the illegality of the Muslim ban, his handling of even though I would think in many ways that him separating children and losing some of the children, like those elements should be an impeachable offense for a president. That's a high crime to me. Taking a child from their parent and not returning them. I think that's called kidnapping most of the time. So the idea that, but he's not going to lose office or lose the ability to, enact other policies like that because of that. What he will be brought down by, more than likely, is his financial ties to Russians and their illegal help for him in the election. So that's why it deserves an outsized amount of attention. But at the other stories, I think, are important because of the support structure he counts on in the Republican Party. That the people who, back him, the Republicans, the Freedom Caucus, any of that, those folks, where their Achilles heel is in these other stories. And as we get closer to the election, while we will always continue to, draw attention to what will, bring the Trump presidency to an early close, the other aspect is, and I think this is fundamentally important to every argument structure, that anybody who's a genuine progressive or liberal who cares about human beings, who cares about, American citizens of all ethnic and religious and racial and gender, if human beings matter to you, the way the Republicans treat those among us who are the most vulnerable to being acted upon is the reasoning they should never be let in a position of authority over those people. Never mind that they're, throw out that you somehow think that they're going to protect Medicare and Medicaid when they've said that they're planning on gutting it, especially if they stay in. If there's not a blue wave, and I mean a tsunami, this fall, the Republicans will take it as a win that supports the way Donald Trump is running things, and he will spend the next year bulldozing everyone's rights. These children, any chance they have of being reconnected with their parents will be gone. Make no mistake that those children, forget it. DACA itself will be re-legislated into oblivion. There will be a categorical small group of people who will probably be allowed to stay, and then everyone that's even considered marginal, which will be about 80% of DACA recipients, will be with their family members deported. Count on it. On top of that, American citizens born midwives within 100 miles of the border will have their citizenship denied, along with, more than likely, their voting rights. American citizens will lose their voting rights. Secretaries of State, Republican governors, Republican congresspeople, Republican senators will move to guarantee that minorities will continue to lose their ability to vote or vote in a way that represents their actual constituency through a renewed push for gerrymandering, the elimination of polling places, the destruction of the voting infrastructure for anybody but those on the inside. It does matter who runs things. It absolutely matters. And anybody who tells you different or says that, we talked about a little bit of this before, but this idea that you're in a safe state, that your state is safe in any ways, you're not a pivot voter. You're not the voter that the vote pivots on. You're a mandate voter. You are the foundational underpinning of a mandate. If your state is, 2% blue, or 5% or 7 or 10% blue, but not everybody votes that way, so it's always a 1-point fluctuation because people go, well, it's going to go my way anyway, so why bother? You leave open the argument that, well, people believe in a woman's right to choose, but they only believe it by a 1% or 2% margin. And so the legal argument starts to water down over time. Your vote counts all the time because it stands in communal shoulder-to-shoulder support for all the like-minded voters around you. And by the way, this message I'm giving could absolutely fit for Republicans who don't vote either. I don't care. They're not my problem. But Democrats and liberals and progressives are, because we all do share what we want. We may argue about tactics or whether something will work over time, or how big or how fast the change can come. But ultimately, we all, in general, want the same thing. And standing shoulder to shoulder with each other is how you guarantee the safety of those rulings in the future. You don't have these situations where it seems to all who are looking on in an election that tips by 2 or 3%, in states that are resoundingly blue or resoundingly support an idea, people go, well, I don't have to vote. It's going to go that way anyway. No, I know who's going to represent me. But when they come for your representative, when they come for that person you believe in, and they say, well, your public doesn't even back you that much, your vote does not stand in support of that person. And when you start going, well, I wish they wouldn't, pander to one particular group of voters, or they don't listen to young people, or they don't listen to my particular group. If your particular group is not a reliable voting bloc, guess what? They don't believe you exist. You can make all the noise on Twitter you want, but if you don't vote, there is no reason why anyone should take you seriously. You might as well be a Russian bot. All of your activism, all your vocalization, all your emotion, all your emphasis on what is important to you as a voter, as a constituent, as a citizen, and as a human being plays out in the voting booth. And if anything, is indicative of that, it's the way this president got into office with that 77K margin in 3 states, giving the Electoral College to a man who lost the popular vote by 3 million votes. Because in some blue states that were hedgy, they went, I don't know if I'm feeling it. Or I don't like her, so I'll vote for him just to see what happens. Even though the Supreme Court rests on it. Even though what the Supreme Court decides is workers' rights. And the ability for lending companies to, keep people in a cycle of poverty, even though it means LGBT people will ice skate uphill for their rights, even though Title IX rules on sexual assault are being rolled back by Betsy DeVos. And the only way some people can feel good about it is to talk themselves into, well, it would have happened under Hillary anyway. She was just awful. Keep lying to yourself. Keep telling yourself that. And keep telling yourself that Al Gore would have taken us into Iraq. It matters. And if you think there should be somebody better running for office, then by God, be that person. We got to take a break. We'll be back. Do we have a chat? Or do we have a troll? Who's? Yeah, both sides do. Okay, great. Well, let's. Cool. Dual Steves. Excellent. I would not argue personally that gender is a social construct or race is a social construct. And you can ask that question. And I would say that what you're confusing is gender versus biological sex. And it wouldn't be a social construct if anybody can kind of come up with their own version of it. And anybody who can come up with their own version of it, it doesn't make it a social construct. It makes it an individual construct. The idea of hormonal differences in biological sexes and all that kind of stuff is science you can't walk around. But the attempt here is to that's a baiting conversation. It doesn't matter. If it doesn't, just ignore it. He can ask whatever he wants. That's not the point. And no, I don't believe race is a social construct. I think culture is a social construct because I don't believe that everyone in a race attaches themselves to a particular culture, even though it may be the prevailing culture of their race. It can never be. Also, there cannot ever be racism against white people in the U.S. because we are the majority. That's not true either. Racism, bigotry, and prejudice are all individual acts or whatever. The idea that there cannot be racism against any group by another group is an absurdity. There absolutely can be. Welcome back to the show. We actually have some callers, so I want to get to them or whatever. And I think the first one is, and hoping the phones work the way they do because of the rain and the lightning and da-da-da-da, is Steve from the Gold Coast. Stevie there? Absolutely. Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. An argue, by the way, is still like 71% of Republicans, which would, I think, mathematically show that the people who identify as Republicans is an ever shrinking group. And the more they use that percentage, they make it look like, well, 70% of Republicans like him, but 80% of Democrats, as if those are conflatable numbers, meaning, except that the 80% of 10,000 versus the 70% of 5,000. You know, right. Well, and for those of you in the chat room that can't hear that or whatever, what Steve is is making a case, that many of us have made or whatever, that a lot of people are right now farming their own legacy around Donald Trump. They are recognizing that at one point they were lashing their legacy to him, and now they are attempting to detach it as the boat that was towing them careens into the shore, or into the rocks. They are trying to cut that cable and so as not to be destroyed as well. And some cases, and I'm curious what you think about this, Steve, is that the when it comes to Jeff Sessions, I find him to be a rather disgusting human being. I think he's a bigot. I think that's abundantly clear. I think he has a very limited view of the economic value of both work and investment. I think as bad as almost anybody who's ever been in the House or Senate. And at the same time, it's ironic to me that as a fan of law and order, he has gotten in, much like Rex Tillerson almost had a come to Jesus moment once he got into office, and he got a look at what the reality was. Went, oh, whoa, okay, 1 second. I am willing to play fast and loose with certain aspects of things, but this one area where the rules are, sorry, I'll be back in just 1 second. I sound great on the YouTube channel for some reason. Not quite sure. Oh, we're coming back. Yeah, I'm back. Okay, good. Sorry. It almost happens on the half hour, Lady B. If you haven't noticed that, it just loves me. So the thing about Jeff Sessions that I was saying is that he, like a lot of people, seem to have found a line for themselves. They don't seem to have it in terms of racial, boundaries. They still seem to be clinging to their own personal bigotry, but somehow within the rules of these are the rules of the job I have and I will stick to those rules, they seem and many people who follow an authoritarian structure naturally lean that way anyway, so that it explains a lot about his character. But I'm going to grab our other caller, Steve, because we have another Steve, and I want to get to him before the end of the hour. But I appreciate the call. Some great points. I just kind of faded there for a second, so I wasn't able to say proper goodbyes. Let's grab the other Steve, I think is who we have, Lady B. Yeah, hey, go ahead. Hey, Steve, welcome. Go ahead. Mm-hmm. Well, no, no. I mean, you can't have dual Chinese American citizenship. Like it's not like Canada. The rules are very distinct. I mean, some people might artificially be able to, like somehow make some sort of pretense, but no, you're a Chinese citizen or a U.S. citizen. There's no bridge version of citizenship there. Now, but if they do have, but anchor babies of all nationalities have existed over time. People who have attempted to find birthright citizenship or planned birthright citizenship happens with people from all over the world. So not that surprising that Chinese people would do it, but they're not special in that regard any more than, quite frankly, Hispanics are either. Like I said, there was that huge, yeah. Go ahead. Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, again, the idea that they have dual Chinese American citizenship, I like. Having just gotten back from China, it would shock me if anybody even managed that, especially under current Chinese rules, not even the U.S. rules. Like, we might even, as Americans, be open to the idea of having dual citizenship with a bunch of different countries. Like, you can have dual U.S. or Israeli citizenship. There's certainly dual U.S. Canadian. I'm certain that there's got to be U.S. Mexican dual citizenship for some people, just because border countries tend to seem to do that. But I would find it a near impossibility that they had legit dual citizenship. They might have had artificial citizenship or uninformed citizenship in one or the other country, meaning that they had filed for or gotten rid of one citizenship but not let it go. Yeah. Yeah, but I would argue that they are probably still mainly a Chinese citizen who was, either in the U.S. Again, there could be some fluctuation in this, but it's not on a volume that's concerning where it would actually, um, shake down in a way that would affect our immigration system as a whole. You know what I mean? It is one of those things where it is such a minor aspect of that. And if they want to come here and be a part of the United States, and be a valuable member of the United States, more the merrier in that regard. I'm always inspired by how people who want to come here and be a loving part of this country, and know more than most citizens do about our country, because they have sought to come here. That's always inspiring. I appreciate the call, though, and I will look into it. Thanks so much. Thank you, Lady B. Thank you, Chicago. We will see you next week at the in DeKalb, and we'll have a promo running all week for all the information on that. But you can join us there. It will be a great time to be had by all at the cafe. I don't want to say it right. House Cafe in DeKalb. See you next week. That's a terrible graphic, Lady B. That's awesome. That's horrible. I'll make one. So I'm gonna sign off, Lady B, because yeah, I'm gonna sign off, and I'll send you my little promo thing. I got to record it after because I was trying to get all hooked up this morning and I wanted to use it. So, anyways, you're awesome. Okay, be well. Okay, bye. Hey, chat room. There we go. Hopefully this improves the output or whatever. Fingers crossed that it actually does it. Thanks for the show. Like coming to the smaller stream, a streamers chat. I'm guessing streamers chat. Thanks a lot. Yes, there'll be an after show. We're doing an after show right now. Hi. But the I mean, I'm not surprised by these arguments that are coming up in here, and I don't mind that some people have issues with how we speak about these issues, and that there are opinions that differ. I'm not a hardliner on people doing that, and I also think there's room even within the LGBT community for argument about how best to discuss these issues, and as long as there's any fluctuation inside the community, the outside community can be forgiven for either A, not getting it right, or making an attempt at kind of creating a dialogue that that clarifies over time. This is an evolving thing. And again, this has a lot to do with what I said before, that civilization is an ongoing process. That's why they call it civilization, not, so there you go. Hey, I'll be in DeKalb at the House Cafe next Saturday doing the show live. Johnny B will be there. Lady B will be there. Johnny B. Johnny Million will be there. Lady B will be there. We're going to have, kind of our, a lot of the people who are in the western suburbs didn't get to come in because we did it mainly in the city last time. So we're going to do it out that way. Anybody who wants to come out, we'd love to see you guys. Ronald, how could you have a dull Saturday night in Italy? We need an intervention for Ronald, because there's got to be. I have to believe. Let's see. Hal SF form leak. Oh yeah. We didn't cover that. I beg your pardon. I got so carried away with my rant about voting. There you go. Yeah, U.S. Jamaican citizenship is not that weird, as is like Virgin Islands and those kind of things. Again, those are kind of like border states. I think the only one that doesn't do it is obviously Cuba. You had to defect. Johnny B. Yeah. No, Johnny Million. Thoughts on Louis C.K. returning? Yeah. I thought what he did was gross. I thought good for him for admitting it later. He didn't continue to deny and just kind of vanish into the background, and he didn't pull a Kevin Spacey and say blame it on his sexuality or what have you. Insofar as it too early or is it too late? I'll tell you what, it's never too late for people who don't have that kind of baggage getting some attention. You know how many comics who are really solid, myself included, but tons of people that don't get the attention that Louis may have gotten, or other people, producers who were, who never got their day, making a movie because the Weinsteins of the world ate up the bandwidth. I think we are better served as a society looking at the large, and that's why I bring an up and coming comedian with me on the road every time I tour. Next weekend, by the way, I'll be in New Hope, Minnesota, outside of Minneapolis. I'll be in Milwaukee and Madison, Wisconsin, that whole weekend, 6, 7, 8. So let's see. That would be my call, and I think I have. If you want to see my thoughts on Louis C.K., come see my show, because I talk about that issue. I talk about those elements in my show, like what that means. Yeah, how did they did it without the consent of the women in the audience? That's all you need to know. I agree. I mean, yeah, they didn't label. Although the cellar is known for people doing pop-up shows. So the idea is you don't go there going, I'm here to see such and such. And so the entire show is consent-free in that regard. You don't get to pick and choose. You can always, you leave with your feet, but you paid for the whole show whether you like the whole show or not. That's sort of the nature of comedy. That being said, I don't know that either Louis or whoever put him up gave anybody even the warning. I don't know the sort of backstory of him showing up that night. I think it was a dick move. I think it would have been better if people did know. And I think it's indicative of the kind of behavior that got him in trouble in the first place. Yeah, you might want to reload your page. That might help you. Where's the next show? The next show I have is in New Hope, Minnesota, and that's next Friday. So one night only in just outside of Minneapolis. If you're in the Minneapolis area and you want to come see a show, that's it's called the New Hope Cinema Grill in New Hope, Minnesota. I'm doing 2 shows that night. The next night, I'm at Potawatomi Casino in Milwaukee, which I get to. Yay, joy of joy! I do the show, the radio show live in DeKalb, and then drive to Milwaukee to do 2 shows that night. And then the next night, I'm at Comedy on State for just 1 show in Madison, Wisconsin. After that, I'm in. I've got like 2 weeks off because I'm working on the China show. And then I go September 27th to the 29th. I'm at the Comedy Zone in Port Charlotte, Florida. It's the first time back down in Florida in a long time, which will be a good time. And then October 4th through 7th, I'm at the Laugh Factory in Vegas. October 25th, I'm at Martinis Above 4th in San Diego. All this will be up on my website soon. And then I'm at in Atlantic City in December. But now all of November, I'm in China. So. And that's fine, but give women a chance to back out of it. I agree. I mean, I think it should have been posted if he was going to try it. Yeah. Julie's she's on vacation in the Black Forest, so she couldn't join us today. But you know, there you go. Yeah. So and some of you may or may not know that a couple of my more well-known bits were in rebuttal to one of Louis C.K.'s bits, which I ethically and morally had a problem with. Specifically, the why do we pick on babies thing was how he was verbally treating his daughters, and I called BS on that. I didn't buy it. So, how do you have a sex tour bus? Of course, who doesn't? Why wouldn't you? Is Irvine going to happen? It is. I just don't know when yet. I think it might be a Wednesday one night. So. I'm tired of toxic men getting a pass. Yeah, well, imagine when they're taking stage time that could go to you or your friends. That's, it's a double whammy. Let's see, I'm rolling back and looking at some of the chats. CK's all right, but he has time in the spotlight, time for new blood. All right, try real patience. Let's see. Well, if your in-laws are in Milwaukee, let me know. And again, always let me know if you're in the Blue Patch Club, if you're coming to a show, and you get in free, or your guest gets in free, however you want to do it. But you get not with a comic like that out. Let's see. I don't know if I missed what that's referring to, but CL Susie, glad to see you. Went to see Monty Pittman the other night. I mean. Mentioning him to you for some time. I was supposed to go, but bailed at last minute. Yeah, no worries. Seattle Suzuki, he was a good dude, and he Forrest, who plays drums in another band with me, which will be launching this fall. He was playing drums with Monty, so we went. They had their send-off show. They never did say he was going to be there. This is about Louis C.K. The owner said he would never been ostracized because he didn't believe Louis C.K. did anything wrong. Also, I have some questions about your gender and sexuality. My gender and sexuality? Yeah. He's not that funny anyway. Howard circles around him and without being a creep. Thank you, Ginger. And I would like to say that, and Ginger, you've seen the show, especially the newest stuff. Technically speaking, I'm hitting on all these areas where everybody bitches about political correctness has ruined comedy and you're not allowed to talk about stuff. I have never had a problem, and I cover all those issues. I don't get it. I'm sure there are some people who would just walk at the mention of certain words and not, give the philosophical basis or thought point behind the actual story, and the actual joke itself. Any thought, just like the minute if you broach a topic, you can't talk about that. There's no joking about it. It's got to go away. And I'm sure there are people like that, but they don't show up at my show. That's for damn sure. Let's see. The blacks are in the forest. Yeah, it's good, and it's it's about time that they were more comfortable going camping. I don't know, whatever. Hate Alex Baldwin for his toxic behavior and how I hate Michael Shea and Colin Jost. They said recently, leading up to the Emmys. It's a lot of hate, Carrie. I do hate a lot of notable people because they're terrible, and people give them a pass because they're famous. Again, that's a lot of hate. Let's see. I'm saying that you can have a surprise comic come out on stage, but if you bring out someone like Louis C.K., it's going to be like springing Cosby on an unsuspecting audience. I think there's a difference between those two guys, but yeah, I get your point. I don't conflate those two guys any more than there's that argument that conflated like Aziz Ansari and Cosby, or or when they were saying like who's making a comeback and stuff. Like the difference between Matt Lauer's stuff and Cosby stuff and Aziz Ansari, for example. Like I just think there's a world of difference. Even the Chris Hardwick stuff. Like I don't know Chris that well. I don't know the legitimacy of quote his toxic relationship stuff or how honest it was between him and his partner. But there's a huge difference between people who are accused of toxic behavior in a relationship, especially if there's no physical violence, where it's like up to both people about how they are both allowing their partner to talk to them, and all the adult aspects of being in a behavior like that, being in a relationship where you're putting up with certain behavior, or you're allowing certain behavior to go on, or you're acting in such a way that the other person thinks it's okay to talk to you like that. Like you scream at them, so they scream at you, and then they're screaming at you is technically abuse. Like I don't buy that. So I think there is a difference between these two areas, and the people who are in certain areas, where they've been accused of, squirrely relationship behavior is very different from someone who, like Cosby, who drugged someone and raped them while they could not move, or, the physical assault associated with, charges like against people like Danny Masterson, and stuff like that. That is a heavy duty in a zone where there is no kind of, I don't think there should be any even move of that. And that includes some of the stuff that Lauer was accused of. Chris's wife said that Hearst did something to get back at him on the air. I'm convinced of this. What? Chris's wife, family, Hearst did something to get him back on the air. I'm convinced of this. No, they did they looked into it, and I don't think they were, not to people who have been victimized, Hal. Yeah, no, I'm not talking about whether or not you should watch a show. Like, I think you're right about the warning aspect of it. But I do think there's a difference between, on a human level, and at some point it shouldn't matter, who you give, who you allow to be rehabbed back into society and who you don't. Otherwise, otherwise the Believe All Victims movement becomes very similar to the system that was used to lynch black people a long time ago, which was, if it was a white woman, she was always believed, and the black man, even if he had consensual sex, was always the rapist, and there was no otherwise about it. And that's not a healthy spot for anybody to be in. And if you look at I'm curious what you guys think about the Asia Argento storyline then, and Rose McGowan's coming out and kind of being protective of her, because that would fly in the opposite face of sort of everything stated around this issue. And it's there needs to be a warning. And I completely agree with you, Ginger. I think they should be on the list. You know what I mean? I don't think we need a like asterisk. This person might upset you. That's you're going to see comedy. So the law firm that investigated this article also had law firms his wife's family uses. Yeah, I'm not going to go down a road where everybody, that sounds like Trump's argument against Mueller. My wife will not rehab me back. She prefers to keep me chained and whipped every Friday. Well, some people pay good money for that kind of thing. I'm not saying that these men shouldn't have a way to repent, progress, but he hasn't shown any remorse for what he did, especially since he did those jokes coming back. I agree with you, Ginger. I'm speaking more of the abstracts. Asia and Rose are terrible and hypocrites. Did you aim your Steely reporter? Okay. Everyone is really cool with being each other's spotters during the hours we waited, talking to different people and meeting new people. It does make time pass. I didn't miss that part. It was fully investigated and had proof that he was not to blame. Asia is also bad, victimized people because of abusers, because it's not shocking. So it's not shocking to me, nor is it excusable. Yeah, there was no point, though, that The victimized people often becoming abusers thing is usually based on somebody who's victimized as a child and they grow up. Also, not everybody who's victimized as a child becomes an abuser. And so there's an element of, like, adults have agency in their behavior. And I don't buy that she was victimizing him because of what Weinstein did to her. Because women are socialized to be polite at all costs. Cue Ariana Grande and the pervy pastor. I didn't see that, so I don't know. Yeah. I'm rolling back to look. I missed something. All right. Argento's whole story is complex, and given the young man's family was stealing from him as a child and teenager. Yeah, it doesn't make any difference. I find her behavior and post description of it more disturbing than, even the initial allegation, because she did everything that they say, the worst of the worst, like lying about the victim. She didn't know his age, like all the playbook of an abuser, saying he was lying, and like God knows, like what was going through Anthony Bourdain's mind, when he just paid off this kid for this woman, or at least gave her the money that she ended up paying for it with, or whatever, and then she lays it at his feet. Like, ugh. I believe you, Ginger. I just didn't see it. I'm not saying it didn't exist. Ginger, the pastor was awful yesterday. Ariana looked terrified. Yeah, I don't. But yeah, and then I even tweeted, like, huh, over Rose McGowan's response, like, there's more to this story and it'll come out. And the more that it came out, the worse it got. It was, just even more of the exact thing that supposedly all, that male accusers do that makes them so villainous. She did the exact same thing. Yeah, nobody's going to raise the garage. That it's unplugged because we turned this into a studio, so everybody parks outside. I don't know that that's policing what women wear, Carrie, to say that that funeral clothing for a human being shouldn't be a certain kind of revealing or something. That's not. I don't think that's untoward. I think that's to do with the sexualization of an event, not humanity. You know what I mean? It's like some doing, like, dude goes to a funeral of someone of Aretha Franklin stature in a like a weightlifting tank top, one of those, like, stretched ones. Like, you'd come down on him for not wearing respectable clothing. Yeah. Yeah, that's I believe there's proper funeral attire, and there's nothing wrong with saying that something's inappropriate, regardless. You got more shade for the dress than you got for copying the film. That's the interesting thing, Ginger. That's is that she got more crap for her dress than he got for, like, kind of groping her allegedly. And again, I haven't seen this, so I don't know what you guys are talking about. I'd have to look at it, but I believe you. But that's not policing what women wear, to say that somebody shouldn't wear something revealing or something, whatever. Like, yeah, like, how you dress at a funeral matters. It's out of respect for the person, not women can't dress sexier. It's not slut shaming. Just don't go outside naked. Just a suggestion. Even I wouldn't do that. I have to run a box of briefs. Did it more than once. My neighbor told me later it was a nice. Ugh. Well, yeah. But that's true of like I don't go to the car in my underwear. That's why we have outdoor clothing. It's there is such a thing as polite company. And just because people don't want to see you nude doesn't mean human bodies are disgusting or men or women's bodies are disgusting or that you're being sexualized. Like if you're wearing sexualizing clothing, there is an element of you went out looking good for the looks. Like it's weird. That does not excuse sexually aggressive behavior or physicalization, certainly ever. Nobody has any right to put their hands on you without your permission. But the idea that, like, I don't know, like going out in your underwear and saying people are staring is a bizarre statement to make. What did I miss about Anthony Bourdain? I was just saying that, like, she's saying he paid the money to silence his, the guy. And I'm like, it was through his attorney. He let her use his attorney, and God knows what story she told him. And then he ends up committing suicide. Like, I think he was just horrified because he came out and backed her. She's, when she came out against Weinstein and all that, he called her brave. He was completely supportive. And then he kills himself. And then you find out all this story where she used his attorney to put all this together, and he, ended up giving her money or giving the money that went to this kid. God knows if he knew, and what he felt after that happened. And then she's out, there's pictures of her gallivanting with some other dude, like how used and stupid you would feel to participate in the payment towards a sexual abuse, survivor that, after she talked you into this as she was an abuser and other people are just trying to discredit me or what have you. And then, I mean, it's just horrifying. I can't know what he was in his mind, what was in his mind at that moment, but like, it's so disgusting, the entire space around this, and her response to it has been hideous. And anybody who holds her to a different standard than anybody else who's been accused, especially at a lower standard than, than the Chris Hardwicks of the world or the Aziz Ansaris of the world have been held, is particularly weird. Particularly hypocritical and particularly disgusting. False start, but Anthony Bourdain was absolutely correct in his assessment of the sociopath Henry Kissinger. Yeah, Kissinger's gross. Please, for all the men in the chat, go read articles written by women about how they are treated in school and at work. You don't wear a miniskirt and stilettos to black church for a funeral any more than a cod piece. That's right. Yeah. Like, I wouldn't show up at a funeral in one of Paul Stanley's outfits from the Destroyer tour, Doesn't mean it's wrong. Doesn't mean that, showing off my body is disgusting, or men are being, or I'd be slut-shamed for wearing tights, or, I'm being unfairly limited in what men are allowed to wear, right? Yeah, let someone touch her in the wrong way, and there will be pay value. It's tank top, not wife beater now. The wife beater thing actually was derisive towards the men who wore them, not a permission-based name for them. The idea was that only dirtbags who beat their wives and lounged around the house and treated their family like crap wore white tank tops out in public. It was derisive towards the men, not permissive. If you go to my funeral, please do wear that hat. King David Lane, you of all people, I will absolutely. I'll wear for your funeral. I will wear something from the Asylum, from the Dynasty tour. Yeah, I will wear Paul's outfit from the Dynasty tour. I'll give a eulogy in it. I always hated that term, wife beater, like WTF. Well, yeah, it's aimed at the men who wear those things are dirtbag, low-rung, working class guys who beat their wives. So if you wear that, you're that. We don't see enough of your body. I've been on a new eating regimen, and it's been working. I feel good. Like, I was getting really, like, it's not that I let myself go, but I was, like, exhausted, slightly sick when I got back from China the last time. We were eating so much gnarly stuff and new pathogens and stuff, and I just kind of went because we were in such a hurry, and I didn't take care of myself while I was there, and I was like, I feel like I'm gross. And then, you know, now I feel way better, you know, and way more in shape. I know that, Hal, but the name has changed. Just giving you info. Then yeah, but the name hasn't changed. Actors still wear the same type of white beaters today. They're found in the men's section of clothing. It's a nickname left over. That's fine, Jude. We call it a tank top. Like, that name hasn't changed. It you know, people can rather it, but yeah. The assignment of a new label by somebody who doesn't like the old label doesn't mean the name has changed. It's an attempt to move it or whatever. But if people are still vernacularly using a term, it still has life. But the idea is that the funny thing about that is that the life that Wife Beater had as a T-shirt, again, was not in support of the behavior, but was derisive towards working class men. Did you eat strange food for that show? Yes, I did. I ate a lot of strange food. Bye, Seattle Susie Q. I will see you at the next Monty show. Night at the Mayfair Hotel, LA. Taylor is. I'm not going to be there, Seattle Susie Q. I've got a wedding today. So after I finish the, what time is it? After I finish the post show at noon, I got to drive to Santa Barbara, and go do, yeah. Photos from China were amazing. Whatever you're doing works. Yeah, now that, like, for the scouting trip, I lost the 6 or 8 pounds. Is that the white undershirt? Yes, it is. I lost the, like, 6 or 8 pounds that I picked up, just, mainly water weight, because I was, it was just so much, like, just the travel and the lack of sleep and processed food and stuff where we were and how quickly we were eating and at what odd hours. Now I'm back to my own personal regimen, and I'm going to stick to that through the entire shoot. But, yeah. And ironically, the worst food choices ever got offered were in a hospital. That's true. Dress up like Tim Curry in Rocky Horror Picture Show, and yes, you can deliver the eulogy at my... done. And do you want me to sing I'm Going Home? On the day I went away, goodbye. Said all I had to say. Right. Have fun on that drive through the valley. Yeah, well, it's not too bad once you get past a couple of the big spots or whatever. And I can get up there, like, it usually takes me about an hour and 15 minutes to get up there, so it shouldn't be too bad. Wearing a white beater is called taking it back if you grew up in the 80s and remember everyone's drunk white beating fathers. My old friends knew why I did stuff like that. Processed food. Mainly like, like Chinese packaged foods and stuff like that. There was, that just was like in, and when we're shooting stuff in train stations and they have weird stuff in bags that they sell that they don't have. Over here. So we did a few of those things. And, like, afterwards I was like, ugh. That's good. Got my jawline back. Very happy. So, we're good. I came around from having teeth out, and I was offered a crunchy breadstick. Yipe. Oh. White beaters were the standard apparel on cops. Yeah, and that was kind of went to that whole thing. And the idea that the guys that they would drag out of the house who were charged with domestic violence or drunks or meth heads or beat their kids, what have you, like those guys wore the white tank tops, and hence the wife beater attachment, connected to that, and why a lot of dudes don't wear plain white tank tops. Because they don't want to be associated with that. And if they do, Like, they jokingly call it that because it's not a behavior they would participate in. The shaming of Jeffrey Owens for working at Trader Joe's is also awful. I don't know. A lot of people actually were supportive of him. Where am I located? L.A. Not Peter Griffin. Hal, for me, sing the Brad song. By the way, the day before Halloween, I will be doing the Brad part in Rocky Horror Picture Show at the Jam Night. And my birthday this month, September 25th, I'll be performing at the Jam Night as well. It'll be a very special. I'm opening the Jam Night, and we'll be doing a couple of special songs too. So there you go. Pretty awesome. Sing "Dream On" by Aerosmith. Okay, I want to see. All right. Yeah, let's see. So how performing that as well. Well, thank you, Yola. Yeah, they wear trilbies instead. What's that? What's trilby? You know, I think it was in 1993. There's this story came out this week or whatever that Dee Snider of Twisted Sister was broke, mainly because how artists deals with labels go, and he had no money, so he hid his identity to get an office job because he needed to make money somehow. Guy's got a wife and kids, and he eventually, it didn't last very long, but he eventually, because they got some road gigs and some other stuff, and it ended up paying the bills a little bit better and yada yada. But like in '93, it was really bad apparently, and he admits to this. A lot of people don't know that when MSNBC started, Dee Snider of Twisted Sister was the voice of MSNBC. When you'd go, "You're listening to MSNBC," that was Dee Snider of Twisted Sister. Thanks. Yeah, my birthday is the 25th. I turned 40 on the 28th. That's my dad's birthday. You and I have talked about this. Sing over at the Frankenstein place. I'm not doing a big, just live karaoke. Turn into Miranda Sings if I'm not careful. And Miss Julie Carroll, 27th. A lot of Libras in the place. The fact that Jeffrey Owens was outed in that way was terrible. Yeah, I don't, I didn't see the actual outing, just that a lot of the people's response to it was, good for, like, Stephanie Rule was awesome about it. She was like, here's a guy who's, working hard. That's all that can be asked of any of us. He should be celebrated. How's that birthday show of the whiskey looking? It's looking pretty good. Let's see. When we were kids in Houston, we say the devil's whipping his wife. Looking back, it was a terrible thing to say, but that was the time. Yeah, a lot of kids say stuff that don't even have an attachment. You can't blame kids for the kind of language they use or whatever. They may pick it up from parents or whatever, but there's a lot of people who are unforgiving about how people who, under the age of, stuff people did before they were the age of 20, and and they're like unforgiven for that part of it. And like, I don't buy it. Kids' brains aren't fully formed. People got to have room to screw up. My son's a Gemini. I have Libra ascendant. Does that count? Yes, it absolutely counts. Yeah. So, hey, from Buenos Aires, how are you, Mariella? My mom always said the devil's getting married. We never said the devil's whipping his sister, but if the sun came out when it was raining, it meant the devil was getting married. Carrie, what? HBO took all of its late night softcore content off its service? Why? Are we now sex shaming people? Is that what it is? Have we entered Fuel Purity March? Is that what it is? Are we now hating on, are we entering that phase where we decided to like women but only when they're not sexual? And any woman who sexualizes herself or another woman or is part of the sexuality of a woman and or femininity itself is the crime, and therefore anything that plays into the eroticism of that is a violent act towards. I mean, are we getting there? The scary part of our culture right now, no room to screw up anymore. There's a definite toss the baby out with the bathwater mentality right now. And I get, that's Ginger, and that goes with kind of like the grouping we were talking about, sexual assault versus rape and this, the spectrum of bad behavior that's not even sexual assault or rape that gets attached to it, like sidecar to it as if they're the same, which I think, and again, I've said this before, does not raise the catcalling moments of life to the height of rape. What it ultimately does is bring rape down to a, well, how much can you believe people? That's what's happened on a societal level. And in an attempt to make sexual assault or sexual, what is it? The other term, like just behavior, untoward behavior, putting it on the same rung as rape and sexual assault. The idea is that people will take seriously how you treat women in public, which should be a goal in general. But what it did was the exact opposite. It by in the public's idea, taking something that's could be anywhere from a misread behavior to a harmless reaction, depending on what your cultural norm is in your area, and bringing that up to the level of sexual assault and rape, it becomes a reaction in people's concepts of justice and fairness, where actually it starts bringing down, like, well, maybe you don't believe everybody who cries rape, and that's the tough part. You're watching a series on Netflix. Excuse my English. No, not really. I mean, I finished Wild Wild Country a while back. That was probably the last thing I binged. You know what I've been watching is Impulse on YouTube. Talk about, okay, I'm curious, Ginger especially, about your, I don't know if you've seen that show. If you've seen Impulse. It's one of the original series on YouTube. I thought it was fantastic. But it has a warning at the beginning of every episode about people who've dealt with sexual assault and rape, and that this might be triggering or upsetting. It forewarns you about it because it plays an integral part of the plot, and it really goes over in both the victim and the perpetrator's minds, the fluidity of memory, the judgment that that the victim has about herself, the whole, did I lead him on? Was I a part of, was it my fault partly? Am I overreading things? Do I even remember it correctly? All those things that have to come up in a true, in a true life circumstance that victims of all crimes go through. How much is this my fault? What part did I play? That even the most obviously victimized human being will go through. They did a pretty great job of going over that. It is bold in that respect. I actually think they play it up at too much for what kind of storyline, what it's actually dealing with. That they use it to the point where you might go, oh, the A storyline is actually the B storyline, and the B storyline of her dealing with her sexual assault and her interplay with her victimizer. Maybe that's the A storyline. Maybe they're just using the other stuff as a delivery system to get you to pay attention to this thought form, which is a kind of a genius way of doing it. But I don't want to say any more because I don't want to spoil it for you. But I would be really fascinated to see on people who have dealt with this issue or dealt with it in their own lives or whatever, what their take on both the victim and the perpetrator's sort of responses to it and their humanity, how their humanity plays out. Them as imperfect people, which I think is an incredibly healthy way. But it's not a funny show. It is very serious. It's a drama. Cobra Kai sequel series, The Karate Kid, on YouTube is easily better than The Last Jedi. Yeah, that's not hard to believe. Oh, you're reading the Groupie trilogy right now. Don't forget, Ginger has 36 books now as of last week. 35 of them are available. So feel free to pimp yourself out there. Oh, sorry, Carrie, am I allowed to use that word? Yeah, I would. We can talk about it personally when we see each other, Ginger. Like I'm curious. Hmm. Last time I watched TV for more than an hour, there was a Dark Shadows marathon. Funny and also reverent towards the source material while being true to the original movie's characters at the same time introducing new characters. I'm not sure which one you're talking about. That's what has happened. Yeah. So, yeah. So, anyways, I got to take off fairly soon. If there's anything else you guys want to talk about, let me know. I got about 15 minutes left. If there's any element to that, I will be. Let's see. Trying to think show wise. Yeah. So don't forget House Cafe in DeKalb if you want to come down next Saturday, and I notice our troll quieted down when he recognized that I am not a closed ear, closed minded human being. I just happen to think stuff through. Yeah, because you were being playful. Okay, good. Here's the thing, though. This is my biggest concern with language policing, is that oftentimes we do that in exchange for the behavior. I do think it works in terms of like racially provocative, language, specifically, like racist words. So I do believe sometimes that there is a value in just not saying a word, and and even when it comes to even when it comes to the reclamation of the word, which I think some cultures have tried repeatedly and to different extent to reclaim certain words for themselves, saying, okay, we can use that word, but you can't use that word about us, and those kind of things. I even think in those situations that's a mistake. That being said, when something is not a permanent descriptor, like pimp or wife beater in the case of behavior or shooting somebody, and it's an activity that adults of all stripes engage themselves in, then I think their use across a scheme for as a descriptive is very functional, especially if they're meant to be sort of in a derogatory form. If you're using it as an insult or a mild insult or a way to deride a certain behavior, like a wife beater or saying pimp something out. The idea is that you're selling something out forcibly, and the idea is not a positive using that, and it doesn't water down the situation. Nobody goes, nobody can't tell the difference between that use of the word pimp and what an actual pimp does, which is horrifying. So, you know what I mean? And Beto O'Rourke, good on him. I'm a big fan. I think he'd be great. And obviously anybody's better than Ted Cruz, so for God's sake, I hope he gets in. And I loved what he said about the NFL players. I thought, he was very clear and very articulate about his, the meaning of the kneeling, and he said it in a way that a lot of his constituents and a lot of the people around his area can understand. So yeah. I probably won't see Al again until the year 2020. I'll know shows lined up next year in the comedy and yeah, we'll get back there. Whatever. It's the China show that eats into some of my time. It's cheating OAF. Bet on Beto. Yeah, I loved his. Oh, thanks, Sasha. I yeah, I loved what he said, and I thought he really made a point. Some redneck is howling at Wrigley. Okay, well, see again, here's the thing. I love how Ted thought showing a band photo of Beto would turn voters off. I know, and then the Republican Party puts out that like tattooed tough guy picture of Ted Cruz, who is like just a like the least like I don't know. It like the idea that somehow he's a tough guy or some sort of like virile example of proud masculinity is insane. Ted Cruz was paying Cambridge Analytica for Trump because anyone banned in KC to work for him, Beto should use. Yeah, well, absolutely. The nice thing is with Ted Cruz, he's got tons of things he can softly drop in debates and all kinds of other stuff. So, yeah. Yes, thank you, Sasha. Ted Cruz is only 21 months older than Beto. Being in the GOP really ages a person. Yeah. Let's talk about the presidency. I know, yeah, a lot of people are talking about Beto, and I think that's not, President O'Rourke doesn't sound half bad. Trump's dumping for Ted is like, oh my God, and ugh. Again, that becomes this weird thing about the Republicans is this, on the one hand, this sort of vilification of the feminine in men and in women, and this elevation of the masculine in men only. Telling. And yet the people that they put forward as these kind of prime examples of like Hemingway meets Arnold Schwarzenegger as masculinity at its most perfect are Trump and Ted Cruz, these puffy, malnourished, failing examples of what it means to caretake your own humanity. Yeah. For them Russians. Yeah, I think. Alex Jones is younger than me. I think Ted Cruz is younger than me. Yeah. Who was it that I was like the other day? I was like, that guy's younger than me? Holy smokes. Patton, the guy who just pleaded guilty in court or whatever, he's the same age as me. He's 47. He's 48. I'm older than him, a year older than him. I keep forgetting. I'm 48. I'm pretty sure Richard Marx is good on Beto. Marx is a good dude. Richard's yeah. I don't know. Donald Trump keeps staring down the house. The worst thing is that people make up stuff when they were telling you that it was going on in the protest. If you have 70% black league with people getting murdered, you have a 70% black league with people getting murdered. I'm not quite sure I understand that sentence. Maybe a typo, something? I don't know. Yeah, Ted Cruz is a year younger than me. Yeah. I'm beyond the median age now. Almost everyone is younger than me. You start on that criminal path. You see Trump. Yeah. Let's see. Yeah, it's a strange thing, this particular group of human beings, on the, and, they, let's see. I don't know, that's why I was surprised. Okay, maybe I was. Yeah, no, Richard Marx, if you don't follow him on Twitter, and, he and I've kind of become friends through meeting on Twitter. We had lunch a little while ago, and his son's really talented, good singer-songwriter. He's a great kid, Jesse. Just, his politics are in the right place. He's just brutal. He's just not gonna, he gives no ground. Like him and, Billy Baldwin, too. Bless his heart, man. Yeah, Kellyanne Conway is the same age as, one of my bandmates, and she looks like a spitting image doll. Just take care of yourself, people. Hatred bloats. Yeah, it also rots you from the inside, so some people get really gnarly skinny. Yeah, Malcolm Nance is great. He and I have co-tweeted and tweeted back and forth over the years. I've never met him in person, but he's a good soul. Yeah. I'm in bed. Car accident, fortress, so I'm in trauma. I have to live with them, but I don't know that. Yeah, absolutely. Sarah could be Sanders at 36. Yeah. Yeah. Some of the people who have just given up their souls for that dude, I don't get. What party would Malcolm run in? He'd be a Democrat, no question. See, there's a bunch of areas where I think a lot of law enforcement people would actually be Democrats, but but in dealing with some of the legal issues over the years, that come up, like police shooting of unarmed black men and ICE, like deportations and stuff, and how they get weaponized by the sheriffs around them or by the president in the case of ICE. There's this idea that somehow law enforcement agents themselves, cops, and even though, like that one dude who was punched in the face, I think it was in Baltimore, he just got like beat up by this cop. Like, I noticed that Raw's story has a tendency when a white cop does something violent towards someone, they say in the print, in the headline, white cop, blah, 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 Hispanic, black man, blah, blah, blah. They write it out like that. If the cop is Asian, black, or Hispanic, they leave off the race of that cop and just say cop beats up black man. So if you don't read the article, the premise is that all the cops that are doing this are white, and therefore, instead of it being a power issue with some people. Now, there's no question to me that there are racists who are invading police offices, police departments all over the country with the intent of sowing racial discord or getting their rocks off as racists themselves. No question. However, this manipulation of the idea that somehow the only white male cops are shooting black men who are unarmed is not true. Like that female cop who's white also, but is a woman who shot a guy and now is teaching a class on how to basically get away with it. Or policemen of color, or minority policemen who act this way, and it's just not played up as much, and it becomes part of the difference between a racial bigotry that certain cops have towards other people that they either are born with, raised with, believe, or develop over time, versus the generalized us and them that comes with being a cop in certain areas and that kind of stuff. So it's and I agree, Sixes, there should be more tasering instead of shooting. I also think there's a backstory of cops shooting people rather than physically taking them down, rather than cuffing them, when they're alive, all that stuff, which is left over from the AIDS epidemic, because cops for the longest time were like again and again having drilled into their head that if you reach into somebody's pocket or you search them or they move or they attack you and they get blood on you, you're going to catch HIV, and da-da-da. There was a big fear of that, especially during the 90s, that was carried out, and cops were that was drilled into their head, and that's why you see them put on the blue gloves when they reach in, and it's not a stupid thing, because cops have gotten sick, not just HIV being kind of the obvious, but there's a lot of like hepatitis and other diseases that cops have gotten frisking people and stuff like it. It's gnarly, but and so they have this kind of like, I don't want to go anywhere near anybody, and so they'll go for the gun in that regard. I don't want to have to deal with them. Let the coroner pick them up because they're scaring me, and I don't want to have to touch them, and I don't want a disease I could give my family, and blah, blah, blah. And they all hear horror stories, and and so that in the life that they live, in the day-to-day experience, they carry that stuff around with them, and so we can all be very unforgiving about that, if we don't consider it, right? So, indeed, there is an area where like cops have attempted this kind of takeover, like racist cops trying to infiltrate and drive the departments that way or whatever. But our perception, can't be lost that most humans are good, most cops are good, most and we have to the fact that it's news is actually partly why it needs to be addressed. But the idea that when a black person dies or is kidnapped or whatever, the birth of the Black Lives Matter movement out of that, and then the sort of co-opting of the title as if like Blue Lives Matter or White Lives Matter or All Lives Matter, not understanding that the idea that Black Lives Matter was Black Lives Matter 2, just dropping the 2 because they don't get, it was seeming to be, and in some cases is absolutely true, that they weren't given the same value when they are killed or when they're missing, and they made that organization important to exist. And so a lot of people on the right try to denigrate the existence of Black Lives Matter as if it's it's a specializing of a class instead of a recognition of the equalizing of a class of people. Anyways, there you go. I forgot where we got kind of off on that part of it. Whatever. Let's see. I'll roll back. Iron is that supposedly religious, while the Bible expounded makes DJT is the golden calf. Yeah. Well, I mean the number of people, the number of people who I don't want to read that too. It was brought to I just saw that Malcolm said, yeah. The number of evangelicals who line up behind the president shows that, it is the result that they are asking for, not the delivery system. And if you've ever been to seen a guest preacher at a Southern Christian church, white or black, by the way, there's tons of these roving preachers who are like, I was a womanizer and a drinker and drugs. The devil had grabbed me, and now I found Jesus, and I'm a good person. And so the redemption story of the sinner has a twofold benefit. One is, no matter what your sin is, I've probably sinned worse than you, and therefore, if I'm saved, you can be saved, so you can be forgiven. That's great relief to people who feel guilty about stuff that have happened in their lives of all swaths. And the idea of redemption and rebirth is a great idea in humanity. Forgiveness is very important, but also there's a prurient excitement about this guy. Tell me a dirty story, and then tell me that you got forgiven, so I can forgive myself for hearing it. It is the sort of naughtiness of Catholic priests taking confession from certain people. Like, there's a prurient excitement that comes from like, oh yeah, how many times, And obviously some members of the Catholic Church were excited by that, right? To a disgusting level. So, the DNC, the DCCC, the DSCC are a waste of time. Absolutely not. These are organizations meant to get the more Democrats elected to office. They can fail in their making. They can miss, they can miss the mark. But for God's sake, they absolutely exist for a reason, and there's nothing wrong with it. The reason why Andrew Gillum won in Florida is young people who did not get polled voted for him due to his gun control message. Yeah, absolutely. And and why do they not get polled? Because traditionally they don't show up. I grew up in the church you were supposed to repent and turn from. He's still indulging this behavior. Absolutely. Yeah. But the idea is that he's an imperfect vessel for the perfection of God, right? So the idea is that he will give them the Supreme Court they want. He will give them the laws they want. He will protect them from Muslims, which, they fear. And so even though he is imperfect, God is using the imperfect as a vehicle for the perfect. That is a constant refrain in evangelical Christianity. It is absolutely in Baptist churches as well. White and black churches all through the South carry that message, and it is not surprising that Donald Trump links in with that, especially if he's going to, again, this is the difference between people, wanting a sort of like the idea of Donald Trump, and the reason why there was a rise of him, and why a lot of people balked at Obama's presidency, and why they called it the apology tour, and why they feared, the address he gave in Egypt. saying that, America, had made mistakes and why that's wrong, you don't give any ground, is because there's a group of people, and they became the main Trump steadfast voters, and they were also the people who you don't change horses midstream and voted for George W. Bush, even though they may not have thought the Iraq War was the best idea. We got to take the fight to the enemy because they attacked us on our ground. And the idea is that they don't want a president. They want a pit bull. And in the terms of Donald Trump, the reason why they're still with him is the same reason they are still with, they would still be with a pit bull if they looked at their neighborhood and said, people are going to try to rob me. This is a dangerous place. I live in a crap part of town. I'm afraid for my stuff and my life and my family. So I don't care if I don't let my kids touch my pit bull either, because it might bite them. But I'm damn sure he's in the yard. That's 100% where the fervent support of Donald Trump comes from. And those people are lizard braining their way through all these election cycles. They did it with George Bush. They were happy to follow him into war because their lizard brain kicked in. Point says jealous is tied in democratic states. Yep. You have to judge Christianity by Jesus, not Christians. Well, absolutely, because that's the standard. Pit bull of a certain color. Yeah, an orange pit bull. God is a bullet. What does that mean? If people like Michael Steele can remain in the Republican Party to change it from within, we can stick with the Democratic organization for the same reason. I completely agree. And the reason, by the way, they don't poll younger people who only have cell phones is because younger people are not reliable voters. And I hope at some point they will, but if they're reliable this time, there is no guarantee they will be reliable next time for two reasons. One is they're not the same people. They're no longer young voters. They're now in college and have a, or they are out of college and they have an actual place that they, I have something in my eye and it's been bugging me for a little bit. Beg your pardon while I'm scrunching away and trying to get it. But they will not, by any means, ever be a reliable voting bloc. Let's see. They're still polling using landlines. They do in Florida. Don't you have a wedding to do? Yes, I do. But I've got not till 4, so I gotta leave in 15 minutes. So and I still gotta get dressed. So I was at least 5 indicator, 4 indicator, right? Gotcha. Hopefully David Hogg and crew will make the change there. I hope so too. Nothing wrong with being a Democrat. I'm a Democrat. I love being a Democrat. I'm a proud Democrat. God is a Bullet is a song by Concrete Blonde. It started on the soundtrack for The Hidden. I see. Okay. What age would be considered young voters? I'm going to guess 18 to 22. Main early college age. Yeah, and I'm for closed primaries, by the way, because I think there's too much shenanigans that can go on. What's the current polling on Nelson in Florida? I don't know. Yeah, it's like Ben Nelson polling data. Right. Scott versus Nelson. Coming up in just 1 second. According to Real Clear Politics, it's a toss-up. RCP ranking has Rick Scott by +1. CBS has, Gravis has Nelson by 4. NBC has, and Marist poll has Nelson by 4. CBS, Florida Atlantic, and Mason-Dixon have Scott up by 5, 6, and 3, respectively. Yeah. So that's a tough one. That's about turnout. And again, look at this margin. anybody who's talking about friggin' margins by like, well, there's really no difference and blah, blah. No. Bye, Billy. Be well. I'm not getting married. I'm going to a wedding. Yeah, it's a big deal. We've got a whole, and again, it's this idea that it's within these margin of error both directions or whatever, and it's such a flimsy lead. The idea that anybody who is a Democrat is willing to give away an inch of of strength, when the society you wish to actually have is on the line. I have no patience for that stuff. The Jimmy Doring of the electorate. No difference. Everybody's a monster. So why not just vote? Why not just let Trump get in? Why not just let Trump have control? Why not just let Trump separate more families? Why not just let Trump deny a new version of DACA children a chance to live here and U.S. citizens? Why not just let him strip their passports and their citizenship away? Maybe take people who were born here and deport them to a country they're not even from. Because what difference does it make, right? Because it doesn't make any difference. Heck, everybody's bought and paid for. What difference does it make if these, if kids are being sexually assaulted in these detention facilities and they're never going to see their parents again? You know what I mean? Flip of a coin, right? Like, it's the lesser of two evils. Well, if there's a lesser to evil, go with it. You should be all in on less evil. Like, are you out of your mind? Yeah. I'm still on. Did I get kicked off? Yeah, it should be there. Yeah, I'm not a fan of Schumer running things either, but I like Nancy Pelosi, and I think that the interesting thing is she's a very effective leader. The idea that people are like turning on her or whatever, like, just proves the point that all the people who are like, we need more diverse voices, we need more diversity. Yeah, then we get a woman speaker, first one ever, and then we get a Hispanic man running the DNC. Well, we meant other diversity. Please. The Dems let 6 or so of Trump's judges get confirmed so they could go home early. Yeah, to campaign for the fall, and those 6 judges were the people who would have gotten bipartisan support anyways. They're not all evil. Was I gone? Okay, good. Yeah, vote blue no matter who. Yeah. No time for purity tests. You can do a purity test when we have a 60-vote majority in the Senate, okay? Then you can start pairing out the really dangerous corporate ones. And we can, you want to beat the blue dogs of the world? Don't let them be a functional majority of the Democrats in the House. Get more Democrats in there. But the idea that you would let any office go to a Republican ever, at this rate especially, like, we're not, like, you can't pretend like it's 1986 and these there's everybody's talking normally about my friend from across the aisle and da-da-da-da. Like, the illusion that Republicans can be trusted to do anything, even the ones that are supposed to be on the line. Especially, look at how Lindsey Graham is treating the memory of John McCain, and then tell me you're okay with, like, I guess it's, this much difference between the Democrat and the Republican running. Piss off. Like, it's disgusting. If I ever try to fix the video on live streams and I lose the chat and my browser goes bananas. They can stay in the House, but not in the leadership position they hold. Yeah. I just, it's got to have that standard. Anyways, I got to get going, guys, because I got to go drive to a wedding. So you guys are awesome. Thank you for sticking around. I love that we always have good audio on YouTube, even if stuff isn't going well for you know, the feed to Chicago. Although it was better this time, but this is me using the real tie line. So it's interesting that it was slightly less robotic when we did have problems. So fingers crossed it'll get better. More diversity is always welcome and needed, but a woman and a Latino is more diverse than ever, so it's a good beginning. I agree. And the idea that you would, like, you get them and then you're like, they don't think like they're supposed to think. And like, well, they think like they think. As women, as a Latino man. What the hell are they supposed to think like? Do you think automatically that your race defines that you will have good politics or bad politics? Are you high? Then why wouldn't you just why shouldn't Ben Carson run the DCCC? You know what different, you know, if we just need more women in general, which I think we do, especially Democrat women, but you know, I think the Democratic leadership could do more with more women voices. But the idea that any voice is interchangeable, or that you have to be okay with all of them, or that that's just going to be enough, or that everybody's going to think uniform is like, well, then what gripe do you have with Ann Coulter or Sarah Palin or Michelle Bachmann or you know or Ivanka? You know what I mean? If that's automatic, and you know, to look at Jesse Lee Peterson and tell me that, you know, simply being a black speaker will be enough to make you a decent person. That guy's a creep. He's gross. And his opinions are the worst, kind of like junk Christianity, bigotry towards his own people. It's gross. Now, does that mean that every, like, black commentator that's conservative that I disagree with is bigoted and racist as Peterson is? No. But does that mean that makes them okay, or that I agree with them simply because they're a, quote, diverse voice? They're different from my voice? No. So, obviously it matters. No wonder Sean Hannity likes Jesse Lee Peterson. Yeah, because Jesse Lee Peterson wants to be Sean Hannity. So, anyways, I got to go, you guys. I got to drive, and I got to break down the studio in here so we can go back to recording rock music later before I take off. But you guys are fantastic. I will see you guys very, very soon. And take care of yourselves and take care of somebody else. And I'll see you next time.